Actually, I hate being an entrepreneur, but I'm very entrepreneurial.
Explain that.
The challenge is, as you said, as much as you're now part of the Universal, the Warner, the Sony system, you don't necessarily get any special treatment outside of your home territory unless there's a partner formally on board. As a manager, I'm like, get these other fucking countries on board. Like, I need boots on the ground who have skin in the game, who are putting up money that I can call and be like, what's going on? But I took the gamble here.
Exactly.
So I've invested my own money into this. So I have to make that back. So Remix is this cultural incubator, right? And it's known for excellence. And that's the way we've promoted it and talked about it to the world, is that the young people that come through these doors are brilliant. They have talent. They're full of potential. And we're helping them to realize their potential through a passion-based approach. The biggest misconception in team building is I need another me, and I can do twice as much. It's like, no, you don't. You're already you.
Yeah.
You absolutely do not need another you.
Yeah,
you need someone who's good where you suck. You're trying to find a balance, because if you don't take care of yourself, if you don't give yourself Sunday, then you are not the person that your client deserves.
What's going on, sir?
What's going on, sir? Good, man.
I don't even know where to start this podcast, man, but let me just put a couple of titles here out from that involve Gavin Sheppard.
Okay.
Co-founder of the Remix Project.
Yeah.
Founder of Public Records, who on the label, I believe, is Melanie Fiona and Russell.
Yep.
You are a co-founder of Quiet as Kept, managing Nonso, Jesse Royal, Francis Gahi, and Mr. How do you pronounce it? Aneba,
yeah.
Aneba.
Aneba, yeah.
You're a Yale World Fellow.
Mm-hmm.
You're a TED Talk Fellow.
Yeah.
But you're also my brother.
Yeah.
Also
Definitely.
a mentor of mine. It's an honor to have you on here. We're friends first, but I mean, our careers been pretty aligned over so many years, man. But thanks for coming on, bro.
I appreciate you, man. It's always been a two-way street with us. So
yes, sir.
You asked me to do something, I'm going to do it. There's probably going to be a lot of people watching the podcast be like, that mother... Like, you didn't do my podcast. And like, God bless everyone. I will at one point. You know what I mean?
At one point.
Like,
Yeah. Well, listen, man.
Louise called, I answered. It is what it is.
Thank you so much, man. It is truly an honor. I don't even know where to start this on. I wanted to really start with like the early part of your journey, really. I think if we talk about Remix early, a lot of people know what Remix is, but I think it's worth you talking about that. But even before that, if I'm not mistaken, your mom was a painter or the journalist? Your mom was a painter?
Yeah, my dad.
And your father was a journalist?
Yeah, that's right.
Was that informing a lot of the decisions that you were making?
I mean, definitely language and art expression, those are storytelling, really. Like, even now, like, what I finally have like distilled, like, people, always, what do you do? And you're like, I don't everything. Like, I help people. Like, that's, usually my answer. But what I've kind of distilled it to is I support storytellers, right? So whether that's in music, whether that's in film, whether that's in street fashion, whatever it is, but like storytellers. And that definitely is informed by my mother, the artist, who's also a librarian. So I grew up, at her art studio, but also in the library. And then my father being a journalist, right? First being a reporter and then being a columnist and then an editor to finish his career. So absolutely, like those, I'm really lucky to have two phenomenal parents, that left a big impression on me in those areas, but also in the ways that they moved through the world, in the ways that they engaged community, the way that they built community, and the way that they showed up for people. That I'm definitely a product of Barb and Rob.
What was your father reporting on?
He politics for the most part, and then like federal politics. He was at the Globe and Mail for a long, long time, and then moved over to Maclean's and was an editor for politics, but also health, and finished his career at CBC, the website, again in national politics. He wrote a book like with Michael Valpy on like federal politics and like the Canadian Constitution, which like no one will know or reference and whatever, but like he's deep in it. You know what I mean? Like sick. For sure. At one point, like he'd tell me some wild stories. There's pictures of him like interviewing Tracy McGrady and Vince Carter on some like health whatever stuff, but then there's also like stories of him interviewing like the first Trudeau, like Pierre Trudeau, in a bathtub because it was the only time he could get on a campaign tour,
So that
and
was the era he was covering.
covering coming up. Yeah, like he was a young reporter coming up during that time, right? So
No way.
yeah, and they benefited a lot from those policies. Like they my mom had a commune from some like Trudeau grants back in the day, and they were hippies, and definitely kind of found their way um again through storytelling, really, through believing in different things that they felt needed to be shared and needed to be told and finding their own way to express those things. So my mom through visual art and my father through the word.
That's amazing. I'm interested to know the name. Do you know the name of the book that your father?
It's literally like Canadian Constitution. I have it. I should know it. It's terrible. But
Send me the
Robert
photo.
Sheppard, Michael
Let
Valpy
let me
wrote
know,
this
man.
thing.
I I'm curious just to like actually skim through that. Like the Tracy McGrady and Vince Carter interview. That's cool,
That's
but
an
like
epic photo. I have that on Instagram. I'll share it with you.
nice with Trudeau.
No,
I was gonna say
no.
that's more
That
interesting.
I don't think they
At this
had
point in my
there
life, I
wasn't as many
find that
kids.
more
Yeah,
interesting.
no,
Like,
it's a wild story. It always sticks in my head, for
yeah,
sure.
was he sharing a lot of those? I guess you said yeah, but I mean, like with your mom and your dad, and are you only child
No,
or
I have a sister.
you have a sister?
Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah.
Um, were you guys having a lot of conversations about some of the stuff at the dinner table or at home?
Certain things for sure, like um listening to a lot of conversations as well, like growing up, again, whether it's them talking or even just parties they would have, like going to sleep and people would be dancing downstairs and
Yeah, yeah,
music's playing and,
yeah,
and what have you,
yeah.
and that kind of vibe. My mom would go out every Friday night for life drawing classes and with her friends. And so it would be pizza night with my dad. And, we would certainly have like convos. They were really walking a fine line between raising their kids in a way that they wanted them to live in the world, but also like making sure that we made our own decisions and were empowered to make our own decisions about what we cared about, what we wanted to do, um, and yeah, and how we kind of engaged with community and with the world around us, right? So it was an interesting come up for sure. But yeah, we do like just like name every capital of every province at the dinner table, and you're just like, "Oh, I don't know, man." Like,
Yeah.
try to figure that out. But like I never did well in the formal education system. I struggled a lot. Um, but I was given the gift of education and the gift of curiosity and the gift of like figuring things out from my parents. Like my mom as a child would always be like, "What could we do with this? What could we?" Would be a cardboard box, and she's like, "What can we make?" And we'd make a car, and we'd like draw the wheels on it and create a car, and we'd be, whatever. So I think that's it
Very
informed
dope.
so much of my life, is in terms of like, well, let's just look what we have around us. What can we do with this to do what we want to do, or to
That's
make what we
crazy.
want to make or build what we want to build? Like, let's just look around us first and start with that,
Okay.
you know?
Is that the school part is interesting to me
Mhm.
because why do you think you weren't that good of a student?
I think I wasn't very much engaged. We had really large class sizes. We came from the era where all arts classes and funding for after school programs were cut as well, right? That was like the Mike Harris era where it
That's
came in.
right.
And
Mega City.
yeah, so we were like that generation that were just coming into middle school when like all those cuts happened and
Yeah.
everything, right? So we essentially lost all the arts programming, all the after school programming. And the class sizes were huge. And so I just wasn't engaged, like, and I think that was a large part of it. And for so long I would have been frustrated. For so long I was frustrated by teachers being like, they need to engage. The school's not interesting. This shit's not cool. Like it's boring. They don't engage me. They don't speak to me. I don't understand. Like this, there's
You
just a
communicate that
difference.
with your folks, man.
Yeah, and,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
also just like personally, even privately. And then as you get older, you start to realize like systemically how messed up this was, and like that, of course, if someone has 32 students in a class, they have to appeal to the broadest like scope of any
Yep.
lesson that they're trying to teach, right?
Yeah.
They don't have the ability to do one-on-one.
Yeah.
And I really needed that kind of focus and that kind of attention to help me thrive, and I wasn't receiving it. And so then I would just talk to people and just talk to my peers and whatever, and then get in trouble for talking all the time, and then get kicked out of class or all that type of stuff. And then, was tested to see like what my learning disabilities were, and they were like, yeah, after 2 days of testing, they're like, yeah, he doesn't have any learning disabilities. Like the diagnosis is apathy, and it's just like, well, that's stupid to tell a 12-year-old,
Yeah.
like clearly there's something else here. And yeah, I think like ultimately, again, I started to realize later that we need to meet people where they are when it comes to learning, that we're losing a lot of really smart people through the cracks.
Yeah.
And so as we started to design what would become the Remix project, and as we refined it and refined it and refined it through trial and error, we really wanted to focus on doing deep investment with individuals, because we felt that from our own experiences, not just mine, but those of my peers that were helping to grow this thing from its inception, like we all kind of felt the same, was that like, we really needed someone to like meet us where we were, talk to us in a way that we understood, and then that could unlock our potential and we could walk through doors and we could grow and whatnot. It's not that we wanted to stay where we were, but
Right.
we needed someone to meet us there first, so then we could walk through those doors together.
How old are you when you're thinking like this though? Because when I'm assuming you're a bit of a younger age. How old are you when you're this is starting to become apparent to you?
Like, you know, middle school into high school for sure,
S-
because I started the first iteration of Remix when I was 17, right?
Yeah.
Turning 18. So I was definitely reading a lot of books. Well, I was reading my whole life, but
Well,
like started reading a lot of books that were a little more political and a little more like social commentary by like 14, 15 for sure, 15, 16.
yeah.
Mr. Johnstone was a teacher that made a huge impact on my life. And he started giving me ad busters in the early days and different books like that to read in grade 10. And I credit him with the reason why I didn't drop out of school, because I was definitely on my way to doing it. But I wanted to go to his class, and it was homeroom, and my school was 45 minutes away. So I was like, "Fuck, I'm here. I'm not gonna go all the way home." So I'll stick around for a while until take the bus back
Fucking
later with everyone.
Richview,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. I was in
Yeah.
French immersion because my parents are Montrealers. So they're Anglophones, but they're from
Oh shit.
Montreal. So they thought it
Okay.
was important that I learn French. So I was going pretty far from my community, which was another thing, because my friends in my neighborhood had a very different reality than my friends at school. Like
Yeah.
Lakeshore, where I grew up, is a very like just diverse area in the truest sense of the word, from uh cultures, backgrounds, ethnicities, but also like financially, religious views, like everything.
It's
Like
diaspora of
it's
different
it it
individuals.
is. And a lot of folks were struggling. I was the house that was kind of like, my house was like the safe house. You know
For
what I mean?
everybody.
For everybody, like people would come there. You can get food. There's somewhere. Like I would come home in my teenage years, and I wasn't even home, and there's people in my basement like using the weight set. You know
That's
what I mean? I'm
amazing.
like, Trey, what are you doing? He's like, your mom let me in, man. Yo, you got some rhubarb cake? I'm like, cool, whatever. But um anyways, it was very different, and I felt out of place up there, and I resented. It was, from a pretty affluent area where the school was, and I definitely resented the affluence, the wealth, the casualness of that wealth. And it helped further kind of push me down the path of like, just like, why is it like this? And like what are the systems that are keeping us separate and like holding us down and like not allowing for opportunities? um And so, yeah, I started reading a lot of books. That's where like my social media name is Gavatista. That comes from the Zapatistas, of course, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Zapatista like philosophy and ideology had a huge impact on me in high school. Like they came into the world's view in 1994. I would have been 12. So a few years later is when I really started to like pick up on them. Um, but between
From
like,
and that's just from reading the books. Like
yeah, like Our
you
Word Is
remember
Our
how you came
Weapon
I
was a
remember
book.
coming across Apathy's Rage Against the Machine.
Yeah, Rage Against the
That's where
Machine
I
was
came
definitely
across
a
it.
big intro point, and
Yeah.
again, I think through, like, Ad Busters magazine, which Mr.
Okay.
Johnstone had given me, and some stuff like that, kind of put me on and introduced me. And then of course, like, um, then also reading a lot about the Black Panther Party and being put on by different music that I was listening to.
Yeah.
And then listening to, like, hearing stories about these record labels that I loved and looked up to, and like the Def Jams of the world, but then, going back to like the Motowns and like these kind of different ideas and philosophies swirling around is what eventually led to, again, what became the Remix Project. Like I feel
Mhm.
like the Zapatistas, the Black Panther Party, and Motown is kind of like the three pillars that informed my lens going into creating Remix. And obviously there's co-founders and other people contributing who had their own perspectives and their own histories and their own lenses that they're approaching it with, and helping to
Mhm.
inform it and grow it. But those were my founding, like, uh principles and,
Principles,
and
yeah,
philosophies.
and
That's where they
values,
came
yeah.
from, values and whatnot. They came from those spaces,
Yeah.
and that started in high school and then got more and more refined, as I got older.
Ho how are you what are some of the
And most of it came to me through music,
for sure,
right? Like through
for
rap
sure.
music, like for the vast majority, right?
Yeah, for sure, but when you're in the community and you're thinking about these things and you're realizing, "Okay, I'm not the only one that's engaged in school. There's a
Mhm.
lot of us around here,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
the
yeah.
system doesn't give a shit about us."
Absolutely.
But now you're having these conversations with your friends, your people. How, how are you finding ways to mobilize everybody to create what then becomes Remix Project? Prior to that, it's I See Visions,
Mhm.
and we can go into it because we're talking as if the whole world knows what the Remix Project is, and a lot of people do know about it,
Right,
right?
right.
But like,
Yeah,
it's
which
important,
trips
maybe
me out all the time when I meet people in other cities and they're like,
Brother,
"Oh yeah, that's cool."
any time I drop the Remix Project, whether it's New York, whether it's LA, I've heard it in interviews. It's
Mhm.
fascinating to me, but not so much because we'll talk about the
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
success stories of Remix Project, but yeah, it's crazy, but not
Mhm.
everybody knows about it.
Mhm.
But how are you mobilizing everybody? If you remember, like strategically, what is it that's getting everybody to get behind this idea?
I think it's the same, like, that's one of the major threads of my life, which is using a passion-based approach, right? And so when I say a passion-based approach, it's like, well, what are people's passions and how are we using that as the entry point to move the needle, right? So for us, it was hip hop. Like we grew up in that era. There was still people breakdancing outside by the basketball courts. Like when I grew up, you know what I mean? Like I was jumping the train with Skills to Kill, going down to first to, El Macombo and spots like that, Comfort Zone, and then even out to
Elma
Scarborough.
combo.
Yeah, like, and then
Oh, no, sorry. I'm thinking. What am I
Comfort
thinking?
Zone.
Well, there's Comfort Zone
It's
for sure.
wild.
CZ,
Yeah, yeah. But then
Elements,
we yeah, Elemental. Yeah,
Elemental.
yeah,
Sorry,
yeah, for sure. I
Elemental.
was going to all those shows. And then going all the way out to Scarborough Town Center, right? There was like the rec room in Scarborough Town Center where Supernaturals would break dance. And like I didn't know them, but my Skills to Kill homies were connected and we
I was
go out
gonna
there a
say,
few
how this
times.
is all pre-internet. How you
Yeah.
even know? But
Just by meeting people, right? Like
yeah,
I met some DJs.
you're live cutting, right? Okay,
So I'm in when I was in grade 9, I met a DJ in my high school named DJ Ewok, and he was doing his co-op at Play to Record in grade 12. He was in grade 12 and he was selling mixtapes. And so he had his first set of mixtapes, he was moving them, and I bought one, then I brought it home, and then I showed some friends, and I got more for them, and then I was like, "Bro, I could move these for you." So I started selling like mixtapes for him.
yeah,
I sold his first mixtape and his second mixtape, and started moving them at like Islington subway station, like selling them at the subway station at Islington, Kipling, at 10th Street, at the basketball courts, and just like everywhere I could.
yeah,
And so I started moving tapes in grade 9, and that's how I met a lot of people, and then, kept
crazy.
finding ways to contribute. Some friends of mine had an idea to start a clothing line. I was doing my co-op at a store called Front Runner, which was like a pretty legendary streetwear store by Kipling Station in the west end of the city. And so I was in grade 12 and I was at this shop, and downstairs they had a custom like clothing spot that was like more just like a t-shirt press.
Mhm.
They did basketball jerseys, school uniforms, or like not school uniforms, like sports uniforms, so football jerseys, basketball jerseys, etc. But they also did streetwear lines, so like Nasty Habits out of Rexdale. I met them through there. Fudge, rest in peace, was such a huge, huge, huge like godfather to the scene. He was working out of there, and Juan Lucas had worked there at one point from Shaman Management and
Oh,
those
no
guys. So
worries.
like, you know, there was a lot of people that came through that place. So I met them, and then we started our clothing line, and we were hustling the clothing line. One who I'd met at the barber shop, but had been over at Front Runner at one point as well, but was like, "Oh, I'm doing my first show. It's called the best next shit um, at the Rivoli. Like, you want to sponsor this rapper named Unknown Misery?"
That's what I was thinking,
And
Rivoli.
yeah, and I
Yeah,
was
yeah,
like,
yeah.
"Yeah, cool, for sure. Like, we'll sponsor him." We had some pants, we had t-shirts, we had hats, whatever. So I went down. I was 18. I remember they wouldn't let me in the bar to like whatever, and he like finessed it and had to
Finessed it.
figure it out and start carrying DJ's crates in because you're carrying records, and got in and
Yeah.
sponsored that. And so I just met people through contributing, and I rallied people by moving through our passions, whether that be streetwear, whether that be, the mixtapes, whatever it was, but just figuring out like, how do we contribute? How do we get on? How do we push these ideas further? And like, mobilize around that. It was never like, hey, we should go do something you don't want to do. Right. It
Okay.
was more being like
Yeah.
me being curious about what someone else's passion was, getting excited about that, and then being like, how do I contribute? How do I help? How do I support? And so,
But that's a like, I mean, like, you're really in many ways, it is a revolving door because what you believe when you're doing something like this, I find that you think everybody has the same level of passion that you do,
right.
but it turns out that it's not the same.
Mhm.
So you have to constantly find the
Right.
right people. How
Mhm.
are you not getting burnt out doing that?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's just an energy thing, right? And people pour back into you as much as you pour into them, and some people don't, and you kind of keep it moving.
Right. Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
people
yeah.
fall by the wayside.
Yeah.
I think like it's a it's a mix and a balance of uh wanting to help and being ambitious. And that's, in my instance, I feel is a healthy mix, in terms of what it is, because I am an ambitious person.
For
You know what I
sure.
mean? It's
Yeah,
not like
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
just
yeah.
like
Yeah.
happy to just like toil in the
To
background or
do the thing.
whatever.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not trying to be on the spotlight. Like, that's why I usually say no to a lot
That's
of things or
thank
whatever.
you, by the
But
way. Good. Thank you.
but like,
He's just
I
all he's doing right now is letting me know, like, yo, bro, I don't do this a
yeah,
lot, but I'll do
exactly.
it for you.
You definitely owe me.
Thank you,
No,
man.
not at all, not at all.
I
But
do owe you a lot though, man. Like
yeah, as likewise as I owe you.
I do. Yeah, yeah.
Again, it's a two-way street. We've gained a lot through this relationship, and I think the best relationships are always reciprocal. It's
Mhm,
not a
mhm.
transactional relationship, but it is a
Not at
relationship
all.
that has had transactions,
Absolutely.
and that's cool. Through relationships that maybe don't go the way that you wanted it to go, or people falling off or
Yeah.
whatever. Like, I think, again, for me, it was just always kind of a simple recognition of where people are at and like how they got here. Like, empathy has never been something I struggled with,
Mhm, mhm,
unless it's being overwhelmed, which is can be a struggle for sure.
mhm,
Sometimes you're overwhelmed by other people's emotions and by
mhm.
other people's feelings, and you can shut down because of it. And so I've had to learn how to navigate that, um, because it gets to be a lot. Like, even environments, right? There's so many people. I think it's one of the reasons why I struggled with and continue to not enjoy being in the spotlight, even though I'll host an event in front of like a few
Right.
hundred people,
Yeah.
but like, um, so I think just recognizing the why, you know, and then being like okay with that, and recognizing like that wasn't my fault. I
Yeah.
know I did what I was supposed to do. So, and you can't move forward, or you don't want to move forward, or whatever the case is. So I'm just going to go focus on this. And if this circles back, great. Because I very frequently leave the door open. It's
Very
very, very
true.
rare that I just firmly close the door on something. Like, you have to
Yeah.
do something pretty fucked up,
Yeah.
for me to completely just close the door on someone. But
Yeah.
I'll just recognize that, cool, our paths have diverged. And
Yeah.
maybe they're going to crisscross again at some point, as they often do. And the older I get, the more I recognize that that happens.
Yeah. Because you
Um,
never know what's going on in the other person. The one thing that I'm hearing from this, and it's an important point, is like do your best not to take it personal.
yeah, absolutely. Like, take, you take the important parts personal, and meaning like, what you're passionate about, what you're excited about, what your vision is. Like,
Yeah,
of
yeah.
course, it's personal,
Yes, 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 of
but
course. It's all
you
personal,
can't
but
control other people's realities, you know? And to try and control it is like, who do you think you are?
yeah, well,
You
and you
know what I
can't let it
mean? Like,
control your emotion either, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think like,
Yeah.
I tried to micromanage and like help people maybe overextend myself in a lot of situations, and I had to learn how to pull back a little bit in those things because it does burn you out,
Yeah.
mentally and emotionally. But I also never want to be the person that doesn't recognize those things and doesn't support someone that I believe in or that I care about. So I've tried to find that fine line. And again, this bleeds back into Remix, like systemically. So Remix is this cultural incubator, right? And it's known for excellence. And that's the way we've promoted it and talked about it to the world, is that the young people that come through these doors are brilliant. They have talent. They're full of potential. And we're helping them to realize their potential through a passion based approach, through figuring out what do you want to do, and then saying, okay, if this is what you want to do, if this is where you want to get to, then we have to do this, and this to get there. And we build out like a personalized learning plan, which revolves around them meeting goals, but then is also what we say is a living document. So it lives and grows with us. It can
Mhm.
change, but it's important that we have something to check back in with to
Mhm.
measure our progress. But it can change because we change, right? And yeah, I think like recognizing those things again, like it falls into the philosophy of Remix, where we're building these personalized learning plans, but we're also recognizing that this person's not going to be the best graphic designer if they're getting the shit kicked out of them every night, or they don't know where they're going to sleep, or like food security, like they're hungry. A hungry man is an angry man, right? Like
Mhm.
that's the famous
Mhm.
quote.
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
how do we make sure that we address basic food security? How do we make sure that we address housing? How do we make sure that we're helping someone navigate the justice system because they got charges pending and they're stressed out, they're going to act a certain way? Like, we recognize what these barriers are, and then the more that we can remove the barriers, the more that we can remove fear from an equation, the more that we can remove hurt from an equation, the more that we can remove pain from an equation, the more that we're going to see excellence emerge,
Mhm.
right? Because then people are free to experiment, they're free to fail, they're free to grow, they're free to figure things out.
Can you give
And
a specific example of that? You don't have to name them any names where something that sticks out where like, "This is the approach we took with this person to make that happen, and there was a success that came out of this."
yeah, I think like, there's even been, so there's act like 17 stories flood into my head. But
Which one can
uh
you say? It's like
yeah,
yeah, I
exactly.
know.
Even with staff, I'll say that like, even with our staff, not just with our participants, like we've hired people who are on
Yeah,
charges,
exactly. Yeah, right,
and
right.
who we recognized were like brilliant and were actually the person that we needed. And this thing that happened in their life didn't indicate who they were. You know what I mean? It
Right,
was,
right.
they ended up there probably out of loyalty more than anything, which was a, wrong decision, but a good principle. And you know, we've there's been a couple different instances where we've hired people and they needed stability, they needed structure, and they also needed a bit of freedom to work on their own craft. So we said, this is the hours, this is what we can afford to pay you. We're going to, pay you to work on this. And of course, we're not hiring anyone that's like done something crazy to a
Yeah,
child
yeah,
or
yeah, yeah.
something, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, of
there's
course.
a line.
Of course,
Obviously,
of
we follow
course.
the same codes that the streets follow. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, absolutely.
so, you know, here's some structure, here's a salary, here's some hours. We can't afford to pay you what we want to pay you, but after hours, the space is yours. You can work on your craft, whether that be, a clothing line, whether that be an album, whether that be recording someone else's stuff, whatever. And time again, we've seen that young professionals have emerged to do incredible things in the business world, in the cultural industries, in our political landscape. Um, and I feel like part of that is attributed to them having a safe, welcoming space that allowed them a bit of money in their pocket, supportive structure, and and just a belief in them that allowed them to believe further, you know? And then some credibility as well, because this place has some credibility.
Yeah.
It allowed for someone to walk through the door and be like, "Yeah, I was over here before." And so it opened up the next door. And I think that's one thing that we really wanted to build with Remix is that as we saw our staff take off, we've seen our participants take off. You know, we lose people to success all the time, which is brilliant. You know, it's what you want to do.
Shit, I've never heard that before. That's as a positive.
It's a positive.
Yeah.
It's the goal,
Yeah, it is.
right? Because then it opens up space for the next person to come in and be trained up
Yeah,
and do their
absolutely.
thing, right? So
What are some of those names that we can I mean,
yeah, nothing to
uh,
do with the previous conversation, but you know, I
we
mean,
go everywhere here in this
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. You know, I mean, staff wise, you can look at like an Amanda Paris, you know, who's done
Yeah.
very well. You know, like first becoming kind of like one of the faces of
Oh,
CBC, and
CBC. Yeah.
you know now as an independent filmmaker and media producer, and just remaining a community advocate and hero to so many of us.
First lady of remix.
Yeah, you know, to a guy like Tyrone Edwards, you know, who's
Yep.
like a founding member of the staff,
Yep.
you know, was like one of the first people we hired and built that organization with us from the ground up. Um, you know, being like eTalk now
Yeah.
and you know, went from promoting parties and still doing great as an independent business person there and entrepreneur, but like working at eTalk and
Yep.
shining in those spaces. You know, to Brian Espiritu, you know, of course, the Legends League,
Legends
you
League.
know, being our first creative arts program leader, helping to build that program and infuse so much of his vision into that space. Same with Brian Brock, you know, from day one, infusing his energy and his vision into that space and seeing Brian Espiritu launch Legends League and then, you know, his own creative art practice. And Brian Brock, of course, with Tyrone and Giancarlo doing One Love
One Love
TO and
TO, yeah.
then building that into a media brand as well as streetwear and then turning that into like his, you
Absolute
know,
movement. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And him having so many different businesses that have spun out of that
And
has been inspiring, you
that
know.
movement was, I would say, pretty hand in hand. uh, Pretty critical to a lot of the things that Drake was doing. And 40 was also actually was in the program as well.
He
Or he
was
was
no,
staff.
he was staff. Yeah,
Staff,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
He
he's a
was the
staff.
second person to run the recording art. So first was Soze, who helped really like set the tone in the
So
early
yeah.
days. And then from Soze, we hired 40.
Right.
Um, and yeah, you know, he's another example of someone where we were like, look, we don't have the money we want to pay you, but you can use the studio after hours, right? And so he would bring artists that he wanted to work with after hours and access the space. And as long as it was past work hours, we were like, yeah, go for it. It's just sitting empty, right? And so then he ended up
Yeah.
recording some pretty epic sessions there and songs there and whatnot. And eventually he came to a place where it was like he had an opportunity to go to LA and with Drake and work on the Detox album that we're still waiting for. And you know, I remember him being like, "Yeah, you know, this is an opportunity, you know, whatever." And we were all just like, "Go!" And he's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
"Yeah,
What
I
are we
don't know if I,
talking?
you know, like, is it gonna affect whatever?" Like, bro, we'll figure it out. Like, there'll be a job for you if you want it when you come back, but like, we'll figure this out. You
Yeah,
gotta go, you know.
yeah.
And
Oh, so this
he's
conversation you're having is there's the potential of 40 not coming back. It's like this is
well, and I
time
think
to
he was
go.
worried about losing his job because he was gonna have to be gone for a month or something like that.
That's a
You know?
reality at
Yeah,
that time. Yeah,
exactly. So
yeah,
again, a safe space where someone can take a risk
yeah.
and know that there's a safety net for the first time in their life, you
So
know?
valuable. Yeah,
Um, and we lost him to success, which is
yeah,
amazing, you know?
yeah, yeah.
And as well as a bunch of other people from that circle, and they've paid it forward. You know, they've turned around and hired so many people, so many alumni from the program.
Yeah,
You know, they've given money back, they've given their time back, but they've actually helped build careers, not just in the music industry, but in the creative industries. You know, photographers, graphic designers, creative directors have all come from the Remix Project and have been hired into that space, right? So
absolutely.
they've paid it forward like a million times over, you know,
Yeah,
to their credit, like really and truly.
yeah. That as a crazy class of individuals who've gone on to see a lot of success.
That was the staff. Yeah, you know?
Well, when I say class, I meant the staff.
Yeah,
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 not
yeah.
not 1.0
And
or
it happened
2.0,
after,
but
right? Like Daniel Daly becomes a staff person after,
right.
right? And it's like 40 leaves, you know, we hire Agile, we have Daniel Daly working there. Daniel Daly, again, after hours, sticks around, starts working on his music with 85. They become division.
Yeah, yeah.
That first whole album was recorded after hours after his shift, basically, right?
Yeah, it was
And
yeah, it was
Raheem's contributing,
yep.
and a bunch of other folks, Chantel May, a bunch of folks, Lemon, all these other folks are contributing, you know, and but it was really just him needing that space and some structure and the ability to like just dive deep and be a creative, you know,
Mhm.
and have a few bills paid along the way and be inspired by the people around him because he was like the people in his class of some of the folks I just mentioned. Jesse Reyes was a student in his program, of course.
Well, yeah.
Pretty sure Wonder Girl and Francis were in the rounds that he was teaching.
Yeah, I think
Um,
so. Yeah.
yeah,
Moose,
Moose, you know,
Moose, Raheem.
yeah.
Um,
So, like, you know,
yeah,
you're getting inspired. I think, like, the staff were as much as they were supporting the young people, they're equally being inspired by that energy, you know, and by
yeah.
the brilliance and the ideas of people that are coming through those doors. So it's a very reciprocal environment. It's a youth-led program. That's why I eventually bowed out at one point because it's like, I'm not a youth anymore, you know? And we were screaming youth-led, youth-led, youth-led for so long. And it was like, all right, so you're a hypocrite or you're not. You know, like you gotta so I transferred to the I followed Drex's lead. Drex had already transferred to the board. We lost him to success as well. Not that we
Somebody
lost him. We never lost him.
never
He's
have.
been bored and contributing every day,
Yeah,
you know, in
yeah.
a major way. But he'd moved on professionally as his day job, right? Now he was CFO of OVO and COO. Now he's CEO, you know, of the entire movement. You know, it's incredible to watch.
Not just the clothing brand. This is
Of the clothing
the
brand,
clothing brand. Okay, yeah,
yeah, of
yeah,
October's very own, right?
yeah.
So, it's been incredible to watch, and I'm constantly in awe of my brother, you
Yeah,
know,
it's
and what he's been able to grow
amazing.
because I've seen what where he came from and what he did, and again, someone that didn't have a lot of success in the formal education system, but was always hungry for information and always hungry to do better, you
Yeah,
know, and to lift others as heroes. And so Drex is someone that doesn't get nearly enough flowers.
not nearly enough.
Because
And
mostly because he's even more reticent than I am to be in front of the camera, you know. But he like is so instrumental in so many different movements in this city, both in the social sector as well as in the cultural sector,
yeah,
and has consistently given with his whole heart, as much as he's had to make you know tough decisions with his brain. You know what I mean to advance things.
yeah,
But like he's someone that really deserves it. So he's a co-founder of Remix Project, of course, and Kende Ba
yeah.
as the other co-founder. So there's three of us that are known as the co-founders,
Right.
right? And so I would just give that preface because I know I just kind of start talking about him, and folks might be like,
No,
who
no,
are we
no.
talking
I'm
about?"
glad you brought up Dress because I wanted to bring him up as well.
Mhm.
Because as I'm thinking about the revolving door of individuals that you're trying to make this thing happen with, at one point, Drex is part of this, but is it from the very beginning? Like, when do you guys really connect and realize that, like, okay, this guy is really about this? Because to your point, I mean, his career has absolutely catapulted and it's amazing to watch.
Absolutely. No, it's
But
so cool.
at what point
We
now?
we met in high school. We met in grade 9. Well, I was in grade 9, he's in grade 10. He's a year older than me. So I was I joined a basketball league, after school basketball league that's was running out of Redmond, out of Father John Redmond.
Wow.
So one of my childhood friends is a guy named Raf and another guy, Remy, Paul Remy. And they were playing ball, and my boy Steve Burke, who I often credit with helping to kind of like spur what would become IC Visions. Um, they were all older than me. They're all going up there to play ball. They're all from 10th Street, you know, or in an like 8th to 13th Street to me in my era is all 10th Street.
Okay.
From 8th to 13th. It's all 10th Street because of the basketball courts. I know now there's like different politics and this side is that side and whatever, but we're
You
all
know, we're
from 10th
growing up
Street.
as 10th
You know what
Street.
I
Okay.
mean? So yeah, like I was like, cool, I'm gonna join, you know. And the first day, the first game, like before I got there, these guys came to my school to rush me. And I got into this huge brawl. I didn't really know anyone at the school yet because I'm in French immersion in a new school. I'm in grade 9. And these guys from my old school who went to a different school now had to this day, I still don't know
You don't
why,
know.
but like 30 guys showed up. And this one guy had a problem with me, and they all came to watch him like fight me. And I was like, someone told me, like, yo, these guys are coming for you. So, anyways, long story short, got into a pretty crazy scrap. was one of those things,
Just a
big chain
rumble.
fence, 30,
Yeah,
40
yeah,
people
yeah, yeah.
around you. And luckily they gave us a chance to shoot a fair one. There was some older kids from my school that were like, "Oh no, he's from our school." So they like kind of like were making sure that it was a one-on-one.
Oh, when this was
And
happening, they didn't know who they were pulling up. They saw you and they were
yeah,
like, "No, we remember."
yeah, they're
Oh,
like, "I
okay.
know that guy. He's in my little brother's class, whatever." And
Yeah.
so, a shout out Adam Gadet. I'll never forget that guy like jumping in and throwing some people out of the way so it could still be a fair one. Um, but basically I broke my knuckle, uh, boxer's knuckle. So I broke my knuckle on this kid's face.
Okay.
And yeah, and I was at the bus stop and I was like, fuck, it's my first day of basketball. I gotta get to basketball. And
I'm
I
sure.
I popped it back into place. It was next to this thing, and I like popped it back into place.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I take the bus there. And by the time I get there, now my adrenaline's worn off, right? And
Oh,
so I'm like,
shit.
oh, my hand is killing me, bro. Like it's
Yeah,
starting
yeah,
to
yeah.
swell. And my one of my friends lived across the street, so I went to her house and she gave me some ice, whatever. And I was like, guys, I can't play. And Drex is like, who is this fucking guy? Like,
This is a first day
this
meeting
is
you,
my
just
first time like meeting.
and you're telling them, "Yo, I just got into this rumble,"
Yeah, and
and
everyone's like, my friends from my area, like where I'm like, because we're from like a few minutes apart, which back then, is far enough away. So they're all like, "What the fuck's wrong with you, bro? Like, you're not a fighter."
Yeah, yeah.
I was like, "I don't know, man. He just came for me, but whatever." So that's how I met Drex, and then he,
If you're ever wondering and you can't figure it out, 90% chance it was probably over a girl. It's like
right.
you can't find out what happened.
Chances are, I honestly don't know to this day, but
All good.
he so that's how I met him, and then he formed like there's like a creative collective that he was a part of with Raf, and JR was a part of it. Alexander the
JR.
Yep, who's a
Yeah.
brilliant, musician and creative in his own
Yeah.
right to this day, doing really cool stuff.
Yeah.
And a few other guys. And at first I was kind of like, I didn't know what to make of him. Like he would come around and I'd be like, why is this other white guy here? Like I don't I'm the token dude. Like this is my
It's
spot.
my
Like
spot.
why are you
Yeah, yeah,
here?
yeah. What do we
Yeah,
yeah.
like what it was,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
is you're a kid. You don't know how to operate or like just a
Sure.
bunch of thoughts and
Yeah, yeah,
ideas
yeah.
going around, right? And you're just kind of like, wait, what? Like, huh? And we eventually developed like a really great relationship, and a really beautiful friendship, that has followed us for 25 years,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah. But at what
maybe more, 20, 27 years we've been
and at
friends,
what point are you communicating? I guess this is all happening in real time. You guys become friends and you're like,
Yeah, we
"Let's do
become
this
friends.
thing."
So then I'm pitching him the idea. So I'm managing the creative collective while
I
I'm
s
in high school, right? I have a little fake briefcase and shit. Like,
Actually?
yeah, actually.
You got a
Yeah,
briefcase?
it's like a little leather thing someone
Says
gave me.
Samsonite on
It
it
is
and
some it
everything?
didn't say
Open it
anything,
up
but it
and just
was
clicks,
no, no, no. It was like a
"Here's the
black leather one with
contracts?"
a zipper. And but contracts and notepads, writing down ideas and stuff. And again, because I'd been already been selling mixtapes, like that was from grade
That's
9. And then we
amazing.
had the
Yeah,
clothing line
yeah,
in grade 12.
yeah.
And so that was like what he was wearing it, and Raf was wearing it, and that was part of the same crew, right?
Okay, okay,
Remy
okay.
was one of the partners in the clothing line. It was me, Remy, Puff, Raju, and Amari, that had this clothing called Manifest.
Uh-huh.
And so yeah, we were like sponsoring him and them, and then I was like, I'm gonna start this thing called IC Visions, Inner City Visions. It's like a hip hop community center, and he was like, yeah, cool, sounds good. Like, let me know, like
Mhm, mhm.
I'm gonna do this, and so we got it off the ground, and so it was like a longer process, obviously, but it was a process, and we got this community center off the ground. We were open 2 days a week, and we would do like it was essentially a drop-in program. There was turntables for public use. There's a spot to break. There's computers, there's pool tables, and once a month we would have an open mic or a battle, right? And so
Right.
Drex used to come to the battles and stuff, and we would hang out there too and talk, and then he would start volunteering. We had initially a staff person there for like 3 months. She left. She was like a summer student, and then we had another guy named Alu, Josue Alu, that worked there for almost a year, and where Drex was like volunteering and supporting. And then once Alu left, then Drex became staff. And so that
Okay,
was probably like halfway through year 2 that
okay.
he was there from before
Jump.
anything,
Yeah, yeah.
like we were, friends from high school. Like already we were part of our community, like, but he became staff and he was volunteering from the jump, but he became staff like in that second year. And then he was the one that actually founded the recording studio side of things. So I was managing an artist,
Oh,
Rochester, aka Juice, and I was
shout out
managing Tone
Rochester.
Mason, the production company.
Shout out Tom Mason.
We had his whole little crew called Foundation Creative Group, and it was like Rochester, Tone Mason, Sterling was the creative director,
Yeah.
and Blau from World Rider Studios ran the recording side. And Juice had won Flow's Soul Search. So Flow, the radio station, had their first ever Soul Search competition. He had won that thing. We got funding for his music video through Much Fact for a song called "Do It Like We Do It," which is how I met RT in
S
2004,
That was the one
five.
that was shot on Eglinton?
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. We shot in Eglinton West, which was a wild experience at the time for sure.
Yo,
And
sorry, not
yeah,
RT tells me the story about that because they barely had any film, and he was, like, tapping the cinematographer. You know this?
no,
So he told me a story about that music video where they're running out of film. There's a performance shot of Rochester Juice, who's known at the time,
yeah,
and because they got, like, 45 seconds of film left, he's literally just there beside the DOP, just tapping him to hit the record onto because you're running out of film, and tapping him to turn it off because he's finding the best spots of the performance.
crazy.
Yeah,
That's wild.
yeah.
And it was getting hectic. Like it was getting late at night on Eglinton West. And like a lot of
Good
people were
times, good
like,
times, good times,
"What are
man.
y'all doing here? You ain't from E West,"
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
and it was like, well, we needed this Caribbean vibe. It felt very like it was like kind of a Caravana themed video.
Yeah.
And he wanted to capture that energy. And I mean, Juice had people from around there. We used to get our hair cut at
Oh, I
fadeaway
always thought
cuts
he was
and
from
stuff,
there.
but
Yeah.
it we're not Eglinton
Yeah,
West,
yeah, yeah,
right?
you're not
And
yeah,
so
yeah,
like
yeah.
it was starting to get a bit hectic, but it was great. It was awesome. And I had seen RT shoot, or I had seen the work that made me want to work with RT was seeing Point Blank video when I saw the Thin Line video that he directed, and
Mhm,
Life, Thin Life slash
mhm, mhm, mhm.
slash Life. I was like, I'd never seen a music video from Toronto
From the
look like that,
Toronto.
like
Yeah,
feel like that. It felt cinematic. It was
yeah,
portraits. It was like captured the community in such a beautiful but raw way. And I was like, who is this? Like, I
yeah.
need to work with this guy,
Mhm.
And so, like always, I just get excited about people and stuff. And Juice had won this Flow Soul Search. We got this video fact, and or I guess we would have applied with him to get the video fact. But I went searched
Yep,
him out and found him at Much Music where he was working, and we applied and got that grant. And so I went, we got actually a record deal for Juice through a company called Maple Music, which
right.
is now Cadence, which we'll come back to full circle at some point later.
Wow,
But
okay.
my first deal that I helped an artist get was Rochester at Maple Music. We put out that album and we went on tour with Obi Trice. He had just released the Cheers album, and we did a national tour where we followed his tour buses in two Nissan Altimas. It was
Yeah.
Juice.
But for context, that's a platinum record. Obi was on
He
fire.
was
So
on
this is
fire. It
this is
was
the
huge.
best tour to get on for a hip hop act from Toronto.
Absolutely.
Easily. One of the
Absolutely.
best.
Yeah, it was massive opportunity.
Yeah. He's doing what? 1,000, 2,000 capsized rooms at,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, 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 for
Yeah.
sure. We basically how I got on that tour is we won the Soul Search, and then we decided to throw a showcase at the Rivoli of Juice's stuff. And I found every booking agent in the city, and I sent them the invite. But
How'd
when
you find them?
I just online and through asking, because I was interning at BMG,
Okay.
and I was at that point, I'd started interning at BMG through the street team department. So I was doing street team stuff like putting up poster
Yep.
boards, handing out flyers, and doing
Yep.
that. And then from street team, I came up under Click, right? Under David Cox. That's my other big brother. He's one of the people that raised me. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like Click in terms of this music thing and life too.
Yeah.
Click, Grouch, DJ Grouch, and Saul Guy were like my three kind of like main mentors.
Pretty good mentors.
And Click raised me. Jen Highland as well. I can never forget Jen. Her and Click were partners doing the street team stuff, right?
Okay.
And actually Jen is a huge part in the next part of my life. So I came up, then they moved to street marketing. So then I was assisting them in street marketing, still interning. And then Click got a job as an A&R at Universal.
Yeah.
and Jen moved into the A&R department at BMG, which is where I was doing this street team and then national street marketing work. And I was able to intern under Jen and the administration side of A&R. And so I was like the person listening to demos and filing them, but then I was also like booking flights for In Essence and Keisha Shante as like a 14-year-old with her mom coming in from Ottawa to like sign with Kamara Alfred at BMG and stuff like that.
Crazy.
So like I was there for all that. Ghetto Concept had just done their deal, right? So Seven Bills Entertainment was over there as
Wow.
well. And so
Wow, I didn't
because
know
I'm
that.
in the A&R department in the admin side and
Yeah.
I'm booking all these things, I see all the email addresses and
Smart.
I'm pulling all this stuff. My whole thing was like I wanted to intern in every single part of a record label, not because I wanted to do every job, but because I wanted to know how it worked so I could speak to people properly, right? So
Very
when I
smart.
as a manager, I wanted to know if you were doing your job right or if
Yeah.
you weren't doing your job right.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't know that unless I knew how to do your job. So I interned in all these different departments
Yeah.
to kind of learn the business from the inside out because we didn't have a formal
It's
education,
funny.
right?
I did the same thing when I was doing film as a production assistant. You go in there and you
Yeah.
do what you're told to do by the producer or the production manager. But I was so curious to understand every department
Mhm.
to learn about those departments because I knew back home that because this is in
Yeah.
Vancouver, but we still had Mad Ruck, which is really an idea, Ray and me. And I did the same thing, just every department learn and understand so I can know how to talk to these
Right.
people. And even also maybe this specific department I really fall in love with and I'll go this path, but
Right.
went down the producer path. So I know exactly what you
Yeah,
mean there.
that's
Really smart.
well, I mean, we're again, we're cut from the same cloth, and it's just kind of how you move through the world. You're gonna find a way. And so I found all these booking agents' email addresses and I CC'd them all next to each other on purpose. Like I put all their names beside each other and then didn't
Oh,
BCC them, like CC'd them
so they can
so they can
see
see each other. And then
ah,
immediately one of them hit me back and was like,
that's fucking brilliant.
"Hey, I
Because
see
they're
that."
all beefing with each other
Exactly.
for
They're
sure.
all competing with each other. They're
Yes.
all trying to figure it out.
Yes.
And
I shouldn't say beefing, but competing.
yeah, and
Yes.
so they, again, Rochester just won this thing. It was the first this is the first black music radio station in Canada, which is
Yeah.
insane,
This is
right? Like
2001, maybe
no,
2002.
well, no, 2004 was when it happened.
Sorry,
So
I'm
the
saying that
station had been around since like
yeah,
2000,
founded in like '01, which is wild.
which
Yeah.
is insane
Yeah.
for Canada to be that far behind, but it speaks very clearly to the lack of infrastructure that this country has to support black music.
Yeah.
Um that we only had that one station and it only had come about at that time. But anyways, he'd won their first big competition, so there's a lot of buzz.
Yeah.
And yeah, I put all their names next to each other. One of them got back to me immediately. "Hey, I see you got this person's name and this person's name. Have you been talking with them?" And I said, "Yeah, we've been having some loose conversations, but we haven't signed anything yet. We have this showcase coming up." And he's like,
Yeah.
"Come to my office before the showcase. I wanted you to sit down with me before I'm going to want to
Yeah.
bring the whole team out, but I
Yeah.
want you to come in first." And
Yeah. 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 But you haven't had conversations with
absolutely
these.
not. No, they had no idea who the fuck I was. But I was like, yeah, very preliminary conversations, but we're just starting to get people excited.
By
And,
any means,
yeah.
bro.
So,
Yep.
um, so yeah. Anyways, that's how we got our booking agent. We landed our booking agent. We signed an agreement with Feldman. It was one of the biggest agencies in the country.
That's
And
who hit you up.
and yeah, someone at Feldman, and
Okay.
then they got us on the Obi Trice tour.
Are they still there?
And so
Or
no,
are they
they're
still
not
an
still
agent?
there.
Okay.
No. But Tom Kemp was that guy's boss, and I definitely met Tom at that time, and shout out him because
Shout out Tom.
he's
He's the
done
guy.
incredible work growing
Yeah.
that business, growing that
Yes.
company, and also opening doors for myself and many others, over the years. So, anyways, I went on that tour. It was a incredible experience. I learned a lot. But while I was doing that, Drex was at home and he was like running the studio out of his basement. And the word had gotten out that he had this like studio in his crib, and people were just coming there all the time from all over the
I didn't
city.
know that.
And he was like, "Bro, I can't keep doing this out of my crib. It's getting crazy. Like, there's just people just pulling up. Like, and
Sure.
how he's like, we need to start a studio." And I was like, it was my turn to kind of be like, "I'm not sure, man." Like how he was when I was starting like the
Yeah.
first part of it. And he was like, "Nah, man, whatever." So while I was on that tour, I was gone for a month. He worked on a proposal to get it going, found a space. It was in the basement of a small business center right across the street from the community center where we were already operating from. There was a small business center, and he found a unit in the basement. And I came back and he was like, "Bro, we got it. Like I got the space, whatever." And and that's how the recording art side of IC Vision started, which later became the Remix project,
So this is IC Visions has been founded at this
Yeah,
point or
yeah.
not?
IC Visions was
Oh,
founded in
yeah.
2000. This would have been 2004.
Okay.
Yeah. So we've
Okay.
been running for 3.5 years. And then he started the recording studio side of the program in 2004. We moved into that small business center. We were there for 2004, 2005. 2005 was a time in the city of Toronto known as the Summer of the Gun, right?
Yeah.
It was a ton of media and press around it.
Yep.
It was a record number of young people were on both sides of the trigger, right?
Mhm.
And we had developed the reputation, for being frontline in the community and with a lot of young people involved in those situations, or next to those situations. Um,
When you say we,
the
who are you
IC
referring to?
Visions project, the IC
Gotcha.
Visions project, and so there was a lot of political will to do something, and and no one was quite sure what. It's like we need more youth programs, we need anti-violence programs, anti-gang programs, all this stuff. And we had actually founded IC Visions. Our first grants were through National Crime Prevention and an anti-gang grant, believe it or not, even though we were an arts program.
Mm,
It wasn't the arts councils weren't funding us at first. It took a long time for us to build the credibility to start actually accessing arts funding.
which is also crazy.
Um,
But
yeah, but it's also that the Justice Department and the economic department, they have the most money.
yeah.
The arts
Okay.
councils have a
Yeah,
fraction
fair
of the
enough.
money that the
Fair enough.
Justice Department has.
Yeah.
You know, which is a huge problem unto itself, but that is what it is. Um, so that's when Kende Ba came. So Kende was a young man who was on the he was on the part of the Toronto Youth Cabinet, and I think was at that point he was already a part of the Toronto this community safety secretariat that Mayor Miller had set up.
Yeah.
David Miller was a former mayor of Toronto, was actually a brilliant guy and like really tapped in, someone that I have a lot of respect for to this day. And Kane Day approached us. He came to IC Visions. He'd been hearing about the program. He'd been hearing about the work we were doing, how we were able to engage young people who were very much, at the margins, or at the time the term was at
Mhm.
risk youth, and all that type of stuff from across the GTA. Like we were in South Etobicoke. We had young people coming from all four corners of the city, often from neighborhoods that didn't get along, traveling an hour, 2 hours to get there, and it was a first come, first serve sign up, for the studio program that we had. So you just wait there for 4 hours until it was your turn for 30
No
minutes to,
shit.
like, record one song and then go.
No shit. Yeah.
And so he came and he was like, "What would you do with more money and more support?" And it was the first time that someone had really asked us that question, and we were kinda like, "I don't know," and so we really like took a step back, and during that time we also had lost a really close friend, and another close friend went to prison um, for the same situation, answering that situation, responding to that situation.
Mhm.
And we were just like, man, like, we were hit pretty hard by that, right? It was like, if we can't keep our own friends alive or out of jail, like, what are we really doing here? And so took a big step back and started thinking about like what worked, what didn't work, what were some of the things that we needed to like really push this thing forward. And by this thing I mean this industry, because when we really looked at IC Visions, we had this small, like, it started as just like a place to experiment and like practice the art, of whether it's dance, DJ, art, or MCing. Then we had the studio side. Then we had like a one computer with graphic design stuff that Brian Espiritu started teaching himself like Illustrator and Photoshop on. And we built press kits for people. And we started this series called The Ropes, where we would have music industry professionals come talk to us about the music industry. And that's how I ended up street teaming at BMG, was that David Cox reached out, click, and was like, "Yo, I run the street team at BMG. I heard you got a hip hop community center. Like, I want to put up some posters." And I was like, cool, but like
Sure.
there's actually no one holding down the West End at all. Like I've never seen a street team out here. I've never seen posters at Sherway Gardens, at the movie theater, anywhere. Why don't you give them to me? I'll be your street team for the West End, and in return, like you come talk to us about the business of music. And that's how we did our first The Ropes session. And then it was Ivan, it was Click, then it was Carrie Riley and Joanne,
Yep.
who were working at BMG at the time. Obviously, Carrie's over at Sony now
Uh-huh.
as a director in marketing there. It was Ivan Barry coming to talk to us about A&R, you know. And so folks would come in and basically like run these like afternoon talks about just interviewing them about the business. And that's how
Mhm.
we started our business program. It was called The Ropes at first. But it came through bartering, recognizing like
Bartering.
what can I offer and then what can I, like get back out of this. But I want to bring something to you too. Like I'm not just asking you for something, right? So anyways, we really thought about like, well, what are we lacking? What are we missing? I've been on tour with Rochester, you know. He was one of the only artists signed. There was a few, but he was one of the very few artists signed that was making rap music in the entire country. There was one radio station. There was barely any managers to learn from. There was Chris Smith, who's a legend,
Yep.
and there was Saul and Mr. Morgan, but they were mostly living in America at that point.
Yep.
Like they managed the Rascals, they managed Cardinal,
Yep.
Chaos, but
But they were in New
they were
York.
in New York.
Yeah.
And so there was no one to learn from really, and that was accessible, to us because they were busy, building their careers still at that
Mhm.
point. Um, so we were like, how do we build this industry? And that's when we really, again, like made this like, how do we formalize these different streams? So Remix Project was the remix of the IC Visions project, right? Like that was literally how the name came about. We were like, we'll come up with a better name later. For now, we're just calling it on the grant applications. It was the remix of the IC Visions project. And we're like, well, we'll figure it out. And then we're like, this is too long. We'll just call it the remix project for now.
Mhm.
And then of course, over the years, we breathed life into it. It's like we're remixing social thought. We're helping people remix their lives, all that stuff. But it
Turned
was
out to be a great
literally
name.
the remix of the IC Visions project. And we'll come up with a name at some point.
But you had the name. That's
Yes,
a fire
little did
name.
we
Just
know.
right there, you're looking right at it.
Is
Yeah.
it so, um, when we were building that out, we were like, okay, like how do we formalize this business program? How do we formalize the creative arts program? So we're training graphic designers and photographers, people that can build these press kits, that can do these photo shoots, that understand the language, that understand the culture, that are of the culture. So we can build an industry. And so the first two streams of programming that we got funding for, we were able to get support. So as a woman, there's Kay and Denise Andrea Campbell at the City of Toronto, right?
Okay.
And they really put hours and hours of work in and helped basically like craft it, in the language that it needed to be crafted in, the proposal that is in the language it needed to be crafted in to get grant support and funding support from all these different sources. And we were just pouring ideas and bouncing stuff back and forth, and eventually we got some funding. And the first two programs we opened was the recording arts, recording artists, producers, DJs, and engineers, and the art of business, the business of the music industry, the business of street fashion, the business of PR and events was the first streams. Eventually, we would go on to add the business of sports and athletics,
Yeah.
all things that you needed like passion, intelligence,
You
work ethic, but not necessarily a degree,
right.
to succeed in. And that's where we started. But the business was just as important as the recording arts to me,
Of course.
because we knew that it's not going to be the first year or first 2 years that we're going to see a difference. But if we do this right, in the next 5 years, 10 years, we're going to see an industry.
You knew that.
We knew that. That was like, we were what, 23, 24 at the time
Yeah.
working on this. And that was the vision, like we weren't like teenagers anymore, but we were
Yep.
still very young.
Yep.
But we knew that was the vision. It was like, we're going to help build an industry and we need all the different components because we're pretty much in a blank landscape. Like there's individuals out there doing awesome stuff and cool
Yeah.
different movements, whether it's Jonathan Ramos or whether it was
Right.
the Ivan Berries, whether it was the monolith movement, whether it was, like Infinite and those guys and G7 and whatever. Of course, there was a bunch of movements,
Yeah.
but there wasn't a formal industry
Right.
that existed. And we wanted to help train and grow what would become a formal industry, and that's what we set out to do, and that's what we did, over the next 15 to 20 years,
Yeah, absolutely. That's
Yeah.
amazing,
And now
man.
you're seeing it. Like you're seeing, of course, there's the recording arts participants that everyone knows about, like there's the Jesse Reyes's, there's the Wonder Girls, the Francis Scott Heats and Lou Callas and all these like amazing
Right.
people that have come out of this space. Raheem's like the list goes on and on
Yeah,
and
of
on.
course.
But there's also people in the business, there's folks working at that were working at Sony. There's folks working at Warner in marketing departments. There's A&Rs at Universal that have come from the program. There's A&R at Warner Chappelle, that have come from the program. There's people at Spotify,
Ricardo, yeah.
like obviously, yeah, Carla and Chantel are at
Joven, yeah, Carla.
Spotify,
That's right.
you know,
Oh, that's
um,
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, both of them are over there. Ricardo's director A&R for Canada, I believe his director. It's either way, he's the main A&R for
Yeah,
Canada for Warner Chappelle at this point. He's killing it. Yeah, Jove was at Sony for a while. Jamal was at Warner for a while.
yeah.
They've moved on to do really cool stuff in their own right. Like there's several people. Joel Naga helped launch the Amazon Music Canada side of things, right? Like, there's all these people that have gone on to make a dent in the music industry and bring relevance to these companies from,
Mhm.
like a legitimate kind of like lived it, been there, grew up within it type of perspective,
Yeah.
you know?
So how are you recognize opportunity and, like, you see the gaps.
Mhm.
Do you know what that's about when it comes to you? How you're able to identify those things? You're just very curious person, and not only that, you can also communicate effectively the barter system because that's how you told me about Remix
Right.
Project, and you said, "Come through," and because when I did that music video, I'll
Mhm.
never forget. And this is why I give so much credit to you and Remix and Drex because it's an important part of Mad Ruck,
Mhm.
important part of my career. But I remember outside you saying to me, "Why don't you? Where do you operate out of?" I'm like, "Oh, it's my mother's place." And you're like, "Why don't you come operate at a Remix?" And in my head, I'm like, "I can't pay rent." And I'm like, "Ah," and I was like, "I can't afford that." You're like, "Nah, man, you come mentor some of the youth, and we'll give you a space to operate out of." And you said to me, "It's a barter system." Admittedly, at that time, I had no idea what a barter system meant. And I went and I looked it up right
Right.
away.
Right,
But I
right,
was like,
right.
you gave that space and Mad Rock operated out of there for 5 years until we're too big and moved on, right,
Yeah,
to our
yeah,
own
yeah. Because
office.
we wanted to have a video program, and we knew
Yeah.
how important music video was, to the
Yeah.
ecosystem, but we didn't have someone that was able to dedicate their time to it,
Yeah.
so it was like perfect fit. Like,
So
let's
it's
just
just
figure it
it's
out.
out of necessity. This
It's
is
a
all out of
necessity, and
necessity.
then what can we do with the things around us?
Yeah.
It's the thing that my mom put into
It
my
all
head
goes
from
back
day
full
one.
circle.
You know what I
It's
mean? It's just
crazy.
kind of like, okay, Gavin, what can you do with what's in front of you?
Right.
What can we make?
Yeah.
Look around.
Yeah. Now, all of these people went on to have amazing success stories, and now Remix Projects is still operating. It's like it's an institution of the city at this point in the country.
Absolutely. And what we're really proud of is like the alumni network and how the alumni network continues to pay it forward. And I mentioned how, you know, uh 40 and Future and a couple of the other folks have done that in OVO, but like there's also a ton of other people like Jabril Jala, right? Like Fresh, like
Right.
he opens Get Fresh Company, he starts like selling Mitchell and S out the trunk, of his car and like jerseys and stuff when we met him, ends up becoming a stylist, like working with bossy girls, right?
That's
Like
right.
Caitlin and them, like
Yes.
doing assistant styling and then handling all the men's styling and then,
Yeah.
getting a storefront, doing his own styling business and getting a piece of a storefront, then opening his own bricks and mortar. And then years later, full circle moment, he's collaborating with his own brand, Get Fresh and Mitchell and S. Right. Like what a crazy full circle moment
Yeah,
from hustling it
absolutely.
out the trunk of your car to like
Yeah.
collaborating. But he would then open up the doors to all these other alumni that were coming out of the fashion program, out of the street fashion business program, and giving them their first pop up shop. Like being like, "Oh, you're from Remix? Cool. You can have a weekend to do a pop up out of my spot." Like, there's all these people that have gone on to pay it forward,
Yeah.
and what it's become, which again was fairly intentional, was like we don't have a fraternity and sorority system here like in America, like
We don't.
we don't. And so
Not even in the slightest.
we wanted Remix to be the fraternity and the sorority for the streets. That
Right.
was part of the vision,
Okay.
and we say get money, make change. We say if you don't grind, you don't shine. But we always preface all of it with community over everything. And
Yes.
we really push that community over everything mentality. And I think people understand it because they live it while they're there and they see how not only do they feed into it, but it feeds into them and lifts them up. We always say, like, whether it's a sandwich or a record deal, like, you go to who you know first
Uh-huh.
to try and get that, you know what I mean? Or to figure it out. And so they really understand the value of community, how people's different skill sets contribute to their success and how they in turn contribute back. And it's that barter system. And that mentality has infused, I think, a sense of community across the greater Toronto area in a lot of respects, and has become that fraternity sorority where people are looking out for one another. And now, like, I love, like, when someone will be like, I'll be like, "Oh, they're Remix too, eh?" Like, when they're first meeting someone, like, "Oh, yeah, what round are you?" Like, "Oh,
Yeah.
I'm 8.0." Like,
Yeah, yeah,
"Oh,
yeah.
shit, okay, yeah, I'm 16." Like, "Okay,
Yeah.
you a few years after me, like, what are you doing now?"
But
And then
still, there's a camaraderie
there's a
there.
camaraderie right away that
Immediate.
you have a connection point, right?
Yeah. It's
Like,
true.
like, we're tribal people. Human beings are tribal people, right?
Yeah.
We're looking for where we belong.
Yeah.
We're looking for where do we fit in. And when you can just give that signifier right there, it's like, you have the crest on without having the crest. You're like, oh, we're from the same tribe. Like, we're from the same peoples. Like, okay, cool. Like, I'm gonna look out for you. You're my
It's real
people.
shit.
Yeah, right. So
Yeah.
they know that there's also someone's been vetted. They've had a similar experience, right? Like, I always say common sense isn't there's no such thing as common sense unless you've had a common experience, right? Like, sometimes you're like, "Oh, it's common sense. How do you not know?" And it's like, well, because they don't know.
They don't know.
They haven't had the
Th
experience yet to create that common sense,
Exactly.
right? So you know that someone shares a common experience with you, so you're going to move a certain way.
Yeah.
You're going to respond a certain way. You're going to reciprocate in a certain way. And so there's a bit of a vetting process that's been done as well. And so there's some trust that's been established because graduating from Remix means something. Not everyone graduates. Most people do,
Mhm.
but not everyone does. And
Mhm.
it's important that there's things you have to do to accomplish to get through. Otherwise, it doesn't mean anything,
Doesn't mean anything.
right?
Yeah.
It's now there's 800 to 900 applicants for 45 spots. So people know,
Per
like,
round.
per round. So 800, 900 people are applying, 45 are getting in. That means you're here for a reason,
Right.
like, and you have something to offer. And so people respect that, and
Yeah.
they open doors in kind, right?
How does somebody get into the program?
They go through an application process and then an interview process. So they apply online. At first, we were literally going to community centers and different non-traditional community leaders, aka rappers or OGs in the hood, and being like, "Yo, who is the young one that's like, put me on, put me on, put me on that you can't do shit for? Like, send them to us, you know?"
Yeah.
And so they would we make them fill out application forms,
Yeah.
and online, and then yeah, then we do an interview, right? And then we do a second round interview, and then once you get in, you say, "This is like you're bringing to the table. This is what I've done. This is what I've accomplished." Because we're not a discovery place.
Right, right.
Remix is a now what?
Yep.
It's you've discovered your passion. You're working on it. You're hitting glass ceilings. Now what? That's what Remix is. Remix is the now what. It's a professionalization space.
Do you talk about in this level of detail? I haven't seen anything online you talking about remix like this, or have you? Maybe.
Um, some stuff, like, I try to not repeat the same stories because I know which ones are out there, but there's always going to be some things that I repeat. But probably the only other one that I've ever gone into like detail, and I didn't tell some of these stories, is the Truth Studios one. And I don't think anyone's ever really watched that. God bless that podcast, but like the one I did with
Nick
Nick
with
at
Nick.
Truth, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I tried to find it online actually, and I couldn't
Is it
find
not
it.
there?
No, it wasn't there. But
I
we talked a lot.
and I did talk some stuff with Rich, Rich from he had a show called On the Ones. It's
That sounds so familiar. Oh
Rich
yeah, yeah.
Noir, Rich
Yeah, yeah.
Noir, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So me and Rich did
Like on
one.
Zoom.
We were in person. He came to it was before pandemic,
Oh, okay.
and I used to let him use my office to tape his own stuff. So he did like Bizloke out of my office and a bunch of
Oh
people, and
shit.
then I
Okay,
did
cool.
one with him, and
Okay.
we had some really good conversations. and I was pretty honest about it. I used to let anyone like that's where Extra Gravy first started taping all their
Oh, was it?
podcast
Oh,
was
I didn't
from the
know that.
Quietest Kept office.
I did not know
Yeah,
that.
I gave Marlon and at first Jay and then Marlon and Norm the keys.
Fire.
Like
You've
we
been like
recorded that
that, man.
podcast all the time out of our space. Yeah.
Did I do you remember how you basically told me to stay in remix? Like, it even I mean, we talked about, when I
Yeah,
did the
yeah.
music video and we made it official, but, like, do you remember how I had that Iron Jaw Angels video?
Yeah, yeah, that's the video I remember. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure.
Oh, I was talking about Losing Control
Yeah,
Drex.
yeah, yeah. But I remember us having the conversation and being so excited about the video that you did because I was like, this looks fire. And the song was sick. Like Sazy killed it, Toolman killed it.
Yes.
That was my first time learning about Toolman
Oh, right,
as a
okay.
producer. And I was like, who is this guy? Like,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
years later, he's
I just remember you saying to me, you're like, "So you're gonna stay overnight?" I'm like, "Can I?" Because everybody was leaving.
yeah, yeah,
Nobody ever used that editing room.
right,
I was like, "Can I?" And because my laptop was just fried.
right.
You're like, "Yeah, just if you're gonna come outside for a cigarette or anything like that, just don't close the door behind you because you can't get back in." I was like, "Say word." And I was in there for like 2 weeks,
yeah.
just like sleeping there.
Not even
Like,
showering. Just
bro, it'd be like 48 hours. That's the way I kind of thought about things.
right,
I
yeah.
was just like you said, like very ambitious and just like,
Mhm.
I gotta figure this thing out. And at that time, it was figuring out how to make the best music video for Sazy and Tillman with what I had.
And that video was fire.
Thank you. I mean, I look at that now and I'm like, yeah, I would have done some things differently,
Yeah, for sure. But like
That's
at the
everything.
time, like I was like, yo, what is this? This guy's talented. Like,
Yeah.
we need
Thank you,
him
man.
around here.
Thanks. Well, I never left.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
always say like they couldn't just because I'm the one guy that for a long time people were like, "Oh, what round are you?" I'm like, actually,
Yeah.
somebody told me about Remix one day. I showed up and I kind of never left.
Right, exactly.
They're like,
Exactly.
"How do we get rid of this fucking guy?"
But look at the impact in that you end up mentoring Darren Lopez, D'Lo, and then look at the career
Another
that guy goes off to have, like,
another incredible success story.
right? Like,
Yeah. D'Lo was really like the guy who told me how to or taught me about growth hacking online.
right.
And he started like with YouTube because remember he was
Yeah, yeah.
managing
I
church.
remember it, and YouTube was the first thing that he was really going. They were building
Hard.
churches' music videos up, and I remember being like, "How are you getting this many views and engagement?" Like he was making
It was
that
real.
pop off.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I
Which
was
again, respect to Church's talent and charisma because he had it.
amazing. No, he had
Yeah,
it. Yeah,
he
yeah, yeah,
had
yeah.
it.
Yeah, no, he absolutely did. But there was another layer to it
Yeah.
that
Because there's a lot of talented people that don't get those results.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And D'Lo had he had amazing kind of way of looking at the internet and social media. And then I remember when we sat down, there was one moment where we sat down at Dundas Street Grill, had breakfast. We usually meet up over there when he was still in the city. And he told me about growth hacking social media. And it was a foreign concept to me. Like I didn't know about it, but he was obviously still he did the YouTube stuff with church, but then
Right.
years later, he's now talking about Instagram.
Right.
And then fast forward a little bit, he's living in LA. He lets me stay with him in LA. And I think he's letting everybody stay in
I
LA.
crashed
Again,
there.
the community thing,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. I
It's,
crashed there before.
a
My
lot
first
of this
trip.
how we think is informed by Remix Project and a lot of your vision and Drex and what you guys did with that. It really helped us. And I talk about that all the time, just like this level of community. Like you got to take care of each other. And
Mhm.
Dilo was doing that from afar in a foreign place, which all of us were going to because it was a lot more, I'd say, opportunity,
Way
for
more
us.
opportunity in
Yeah,
LA. Still is to this day.
for
But
sure.
he had the first outpost for the
He had the first
Canadians.
outpost for the Canadians.
Like
Yes, he was the embassy over
he
there for
was,
us.
and Addy Papa was the other ambassador, right?
That's true.
And so
That's
my
right.
first trip ever to LA was with Addy, and we crashed at Delo's crib.
Crazy. My first trip was with Addy and Byron and Son. We're doing music videos for the closers and Rich Kid,
Right.
but we were crashing at Business Place.
Got it.
Um, but I remember D'Lo showing me, and he said, he's like, "Let me just show you what I can do with some of this social media stuff." And at the time, it was meme pages, which we're not thinking about. I'm not thinking about
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And I just trusted him, and I went back to Jesse, and I said to her, "Hey, I think we should try this with D'Lo." And he said, "This is what the cost is," and I think it was like $1,000. And her and I had a very spirited conversation about whether we should let him do it or not. And D'Lo just I went back to him. I said, you know, the conversation that Jesse and I had, and essentially he was like, you know what, forget the feed. Let me just show you what we could do. And he clipped up figures,
Mhm.
put it on. I want to say it was Hot Vocals,
Yeah, hot vocals or listen to these voices, one of those ones.
one of the two. Pretty sure it was Hot Vocals.
Mhm.
And within 36 hours, Jesse had 50,000 followers when followers really mattered. This is before the algorithm
Mhm.
that we have of today. Super engaged. And Jesse's bugging. I didn't tell Jesse that D'Lo was doing this
Mhm.
part,
Right.
right? The whole tactic and strategy behind it. So I saw that and I was like, oh wow. And then I told Jesse, and she's like, oh shit, okay, like let's figure out a more
Mhm.
official partnership here. And he ran it up to like maybe like I would say from his strategy, anywhere from 300 to 500,000 followers in those early days. And they were real followers. It was real tangible. But to your point, when you say with church, like re- she has the talent. Well, she
Mhm.
had a great music video,
Of course.
an incredible song.
Mhm.
You can't do one without the other.
Absolutely.
You now in your career, I mean, you've done so many things. And I wanted to get into like, I mean, we can, like while you're at Remix and you're a director there, you go to Yale, you become a world fellow over there at
Right.
Yale.
Yeah.
I visit you over there in Connecticut. I'm going on the campus of Yale, smoking weed, just like looking at what the fuck is going on in this school. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, that was
First of all, that
wild.
my boy was there, like
That was
at the
wild.
school,
Who's a high school dropout
who's a
himself.
high school dropout himself. I'm a college dropout.
Yeah.
I'm smoking bats on the fucking bench, just like, oh, this is a trip.
Super trip.
Yeah,
Super trip. I got a little BMX bike and I was rocking that BMX bike all over campus. Like,
that's right. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Because we pulled up a couple of times when you were over there in
yeah,
Connecticut.
yeah, yeah. I was lonely as a motherfucker.
Yeah, wait, it wasn't Connecticut. Was it Connecticut or New
Connecticut, yeah.
Haven?
New
I'm
Haven,
saying, yeah, New
Connecticut.
Haven,
Yeah,
Connecticut.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
right. Um,
Which is one of the like at the time like top 5 most dangerous cities in America per
that's
capita,
right.
which I had no
You
idea.
could never tell when
No,
you're
the
in that
campus, you're
little
like, "Oh, this
campus.
beautiful little bubble." Then
You
you
would
step out.
never know.
I remember Rich came and I was like, "Nah, bro, you gotta be careful. Like when you step outside, it could really go down." He was like, "What?" And then when we literally turned the corner and there was a car just like Swiss cheesed, like just fucking holes everywhere. And you're like, I was like, "Bro, I'm telling you, man, just stay on this side
Oh
and
shit.
you'll be all
Yeah,
right. But like, you got to move just like everywhere in the world, right? You go where you're invited, you move with respect.
exactly.
You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like you understand your environment, you respect your environment, um, and you move forward. But that was a trippy experience for sure. But it was a beautiful one, that helped really reinforce the Yale World Fellowship, really helped reinforce to me the brilliance of my own community because again, because I didn't do well in formal education, because I felt kind of locked out of a lot of those spaces and a little bit less than in a lot of ways, finally being able to be welcomed into that space and then do like it was a 6-month fellowship where you do like these lunches and dinners and 3 times a week with different guest speakers and there was a cohort, right, that you were a part of emerging world leaders or mid-range, mid-career kind of people on the world stage, right? So you had like the head of Greenpeace Brazil, then you had someone from the WHO in China, someone else that's like who works for the Johannesburg Stock Exchange and like the India Mint Press, and it was a really diverse, interesting group of people, and they were
Yeah.
all awesome and really cool and really smart, but also you'd have these Yale professors come in and talk to us and whatever, and we'd have these discussions. And I was like, I have these discussions at home with the mandem, like
Right.
with the homies, like,
Right.
and our conversations at home felt even a little more nuanced and a
Ri
little more,
mm,
and partially
more
because we grew up in
specific
a world
because
that
yeah.
was so like, we're the world in one city in Toronto. We're
Yep.
always bumping up against each other. We're
Yep.
always, and I was blessed to have friends that challenged me, that called me out. And that helped me grow, helped me learn, and likewise, I would debate with people stuff all the time, and it really been like was like, oh, I can hang, and like
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah, yeah, yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
nah, I'm good, like I
It
can
gave you the
walk in these. It gave
confidence.
me a confidence because I was like, I have better conversations with Amanda, like and Brian, and like
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
Kamau, like,
yeah,
like the okay, cool. I get it now.
you
Like
get it,
we
yeah,
really are these folks, like Toronto
right,
kids to the world. Like, what are you talking about? Ain't nobody
right,
can stop us. Like we're world class.
real
We
shit,
deserve to be on a world stage. Like
yeah.
we've earned that right. Not deserve it. We've earned that right through the work that we've put in and through the conversations and the time, and the blood, sweat, and tears. So it was a great, beautiful, recharging experience. And it was also very empowering, because of the contacts and the relationships made, but also just because of the realization of like just how brilliant my community is
Mhm.
and like how powerful we are, um, in terms of our ideas and our strength of will and our ability to get things done.
The community over there at Yale helps inform how amazing we are over here
Yeah.
because you're having these conversations and it's just like, yeah, okay. I mean, I have these conversations at home. So all that's really informing to me when I hear that is that a lot of it does come by luck and by chance, time and place for individuals. And we're fortunate in this city that we have someone like you who is able to give the time to individuals that weren't in the right place of their lives.
Mhm.
I gotta thank you for that, man. That's a big thing.
No,
And it's obviously not just you. I know, you have a tough time getting those flowers.
yeah,
I know you always give it back, you ping it right back, but it's a fact. I
for
mean,
sure. We come from legacies, right? And I am proud of the seeds that I've helped to plant.
yeah.
And I recognize that I helped water some things, but I'm not the seed and I'm not the sun and I'm not the soil, but I did help to water it. And I understand and I'm more comfortable in it a bit now because of how comfortable I am giving that love to the people that watered me. So like the DJ Grouches, the Clicks,
Mhm.
the Saul guys, and I recognized that they opened doors for me and I felt it was my responsibility to continue that. So just as many other people come out of Remix and are like, I learned how to move through my experience at Remix, I learned how to move because of Click, because of Grouch, because of Saul,
Real shit.
right? And so it was just me paying forward the blessings that they were giving me and the lessons that they were teaching me. You know what I mean? That
Yep.
then turns into that. So, it's their legacy, it's my legacy, it's our legacy. It's now Jabrel's legacy. It's now Addy Papa's legacy because he's informed and taught so many people and opened the doors for so many alumni and whatever. And we're echoes, right? Like we stand on the shoulders of giants. I'm sure there's people that they are going to point to that helped inform them. It's my
Mhm.
parents' legacy, Remix Project and the people that came out of it. I mean, but I'm sure Click and all them can do that. And I think we just have to keep recognizing that, like, the energy that we put into the world, it is an energy, it is a vibration, it is like a frequency that is around us, right? Like even when we were talking earlier about Belize and just like being welcomed into that space because someone pulled over and gave you a ride down the street, it changes the rest of your day. It sets the tone for the rest of, in that small thing like that in your day, but really it sets the tone for your life.
Mhm.
Right. And so I'm a huge proponent of good energy, of good people connect, of like putting things forward, of being the person that you want others to be. Because the moment you start acting like a dick, like someone's gonna act that way back to you. Like
Yep.
we're mirrors of
Reciprocal.
energy. It's reciprocal, right? And so like you understand those very basic things and it just when you truly understand that and then you embrace that, like, and then you start to move with intention,
Mhm.
it changes your life, for the better. And it changes many people around you, but it changes your life for the better. It's not just like this selfless thing where you're like, I'm just
Yeah,
here to make everyone else's life better. My life has
you wanna
improved
make it.
dramatically because I helped other people improve theirs.
Yeah, simple as that.
Yeah.
What came first, public records or quiet as kept?
So the management company, I had a management company from IC Visions days because I was managing Rochester AK Juice. And Tone Mason and whatnot. And my management company at the time was called Public Management. And
Got you.
so it was like,
Okay.
um,
Oh, so that you
and
just
we
bringing that back.
yeah, exactly. Because I did a radio show. I did college radio for almost 10 years with DJ Grouch. So when I say Grouch raised me, that's one of the ways, right?
Yeah.
Like I started on York University's CHRY 105.5 on a show called The Soundcheck Show, which is DJ Grouch's show and Contagious. And a slew of other people contributed over the years. But I was on that show for almost 10 years. And I started it when I was still in high school. I didn't start the show. I started contributing to the show while I was in my last year of high school.
Yeah.
So I was like crazy to me. I'm like, I'm going to university radio. Like I'm in high school. I felt like a guy. And anyways, I had public management and my name, sorry, I didn't have it yet, but my name on the show was public.
Oh,
So it
okay.
was like my radio name was it came from John Q Public, which was like another thing for John Doe. So like in an old newspaper term, which is like in the opinion of John Q Public,
Yeah.
da 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 da, or Q Public's opinion is this, like it's just meaning like the man in the streets or the common person,
Yeah.
you know. And so for me, it was like just being like a voice in the community, or in a voice for the community or of the community, and within the community. And that was my role on the show, was to like talk about what was happening out there in the neighborhoods, and like what shows were happening and what talent things and you can go to. And it was also a nod to my dad, being a newspaper guy. And so that's where public came from. And then my friends would make fun of me because when they would finally come out with me, because I was the only one that would really go outside from the neighborhood for a long time and go downtown and do stuff, like, and when we go out, they get so frustrated, be like, "Bro, you have to talk to everybody.
Yeah.
Like, stop fucking talking to people. Let's just go. You're so public. Like, why are you so public all the time,
I
man?"
can confirm this.
Like,
Both Gavin, yeah.
so it was like, they'd be like, "Yo, you're so public. You're so public." And then so
Yeah.
that became John Q Public and whatever. And
Yeah.
then there's public management. And then years later, I was, I'd stepped from the executive director position of Remix, where I'd spent most of my adult life, was like running the organization as the executive director. I moved to the board of directors. I helped co-found a short-lived for-profit incubator for Bell Media called Deus. And after a year, that, despite a lot of beautiful intentions, and some investment, that essentially imploded and went through a really brutal, hostile corporate takeover, and was ousted from that space along with every single other staff person. And I was trying to figure out what to do with my life. And at that time, it was a really, really rough, just fucked up period. Basically, like two people I knew and was close with had been were murdered within 2 weeks of each other. Another close friend of mine had been stabbed and was missing for a bit, and we finally found him and he was okay. And I'd gone through this corporate takeover where I'd poured my whole life and identity into
Yeah.
this place, and I'd stepped away from Remix, and this was my big thing. I'd said no to other things, and so it was all of those things at once, and I was in a really fucked up place, and I was basically on my couch for like a month just eating pasta, trying to figure it out, watching Netflix, depressed as shit. And Ricardo Chung reached out to me and was like, I was talking to Chris Taylor, and I told him that you're not, doing this thing anymore, and you're trying to start maybe a management company, because I'd already been starting to think about, what we were going to do. And I was like, maybe it's a management company. There's still a big lack of infrastructure in the Toronto scene. And maybe where I can contribute is doing management, because I have relationships and I know
Mhm.
how to like project manage certain things. And he's like, Chris wants to talk to you. So I went in, I talked to Chris Taylor, who was the president of E1 at the time, and laid out my vision and the concept. And I was like, my friend Trung, who I was working with at Deus, who's been one of my lifelong friends as well, and I are thinking about this. And there's a couple of other people around that I'd wanted to do this with and build it in. And uh, Chris gave us a shot. He put some money in my pocket when I really needed it. And as we were getting started, I had met with Atiba, with Ken Masters and Osei, and they were like, "Hey, we're helping one to start a record label at Universal."
Mm.
And I was like, "Oh, dope. Like our agency, I have this management company and agency that I'm starting. Like maybe I can help you with the branding and develop like the brand and the vision for it." And
Okay.
we had a cool meeting around this. And Osei, I guess, went back and was telling Jeffrey Remedios, this is what Gavin's doing.
Yep.
And we're talking to him and whatever. And then Remedios is like, "What? You're starting a management company over there? No, start it with Universal. Come with me." And he came, we met, we had a really great conversation. I loved his perspective on things. And he was like, "You should come do this with me. Have you signed your paperwork?" And I was like, "Nah, not yet." And he's like, "Well, we should talk. Like, let's figure this out." And I was like, "Look, you know what though? Chris had just really helped me out when I was in a bad situation. And like, I really have a great deal of respect for Chris and also in general, but also how he's looked out. Like, I'm not going to walk away from that right now."
Yeah.
And he was like, "No, I totally respect that. I get that. What about a record label? Do you ever want a record label?" And I was like, "Yeah, since I was a kid, like, of course, you know." And so I went back to Chris and I was like, because in my initial proposal to Chris, it was a management company, but there was the ability to put out records, is what I wanted. And he was like, "Let's start with management and we can grow into that. Maybe we'll figure that out." And he's essentially had shut down the being able to put out record side.
Okay.
So I went back to Chris and said, "Look, Chris, I offered this to you first. You know, you said no, we want to focus on management. Jeffrey's offering me a label situation. And it's essentially like would just be label. I think there's a win-win here because if I'm managing primarily the idea with public or with Quiet as Kept, the management side was going to manage primarily music producers. And so I was like, if I'm managing producers and I have a label, with the producer game, you know, we're always chasing placements. We're always
Yeah,
chasing
exactly.
placements in other places. We're going to continue. Obviously, we're going to do that. But now I have a budget where I can be employing folks steadily and producing records. And then we have a steady stream of income that's going back in. This could be like a left hand and right hand, they're helping each other. You know what I mean? Like there's an ecosystem that we can grow here that could be really
Smart.
beneficial."
Smart. He saw the vision.
He saw the vision. At first, he was like, "I don't really want you to split your attention, you
Yeah.
know, but I also know that if I say no to this, you're going to resent me. And I want to have a long partnership with you, and it's more important to me to allow you this opportunity than it is to like shut it down and to sour our whole relationship."
Mhm.
And I do see the what you're saying. I see the vision, and I hope it works out. And he gave me the blessing to go and do the deal with Jeffrey, and then
Amazing.
I went and did the deal with Jeffrey. So they essentially started at the same time. You
Okay.
know, Quiet was started just like maybe a couple months before, but like on paper,
Yeah.
but really like it was in negotiations and we were figuring out, and that's how it came to be. And it was like this delineation of like, these are the roles and responsibilities. And so Quiet as Kept started initially as four of us, all on equal footing. Everyone had equal like everything. And it was me and Trung, it was T Nice, and it was
Oh, really?
Melanie Moncrief. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And so the four of us were Quiet. And then Public was my company. And then I had interns who later became staff. And so there was Jamal Vickers, there was Maria and Juliana, and there was Janelle. And then there was also like Mel would help out, Trung would help out,
Yeah.
and whatever to get it off the ground. But that's how it came to be.
Now you guys were 4 partners on Quiet as Kept. There was is the JV with E1? They own part of the company as
So
well?
yeah, so how it
Like,
worked
if you
is
don't mind me
no,
asking,
no, of
yeah,
course.
what are the deal
I'm
structures
happy
here?
to share the deal structure. So E1 gave us a bit of money and we split that evenly, right? And the partners on the partner level of it was Trung, myself, and T, and Mel was our coordinator at first, and grew. And basically, they advanced us a pot of money, and we had to recoup that, right? And they also gave us a bit of travel expenses. So
Mhm.
we had our salaries, and then we had a bit of travel expenses, and they gave us the office space, and there was a small fee associated with the office space, but it was basically in their existing office. We didn't have a separate spot, right? So in their existing spot, we had some hot desks that we could use, and they had a small overhead. that was charged back to our account. And all the money that we made off commissions was paid directly to E1. And then once we recouped our account, it was a 50-50 split.
Okay.
So we had a guaranteed
Was it
salary no matter
transparent?
what.
It was very
Very
transparent,
transparent.
easy.
Very easy. Anytime I wanted to look at the books, I could look at the books. This guy named
Nice.
Jay, I could walk into his office, he'd show me.
There wasn't a bunch of charges, line items that all of a sudden you're looking at like, what is this
The
expense?
office expense, I was like, "Oh, wait, what?" But it wasn't
Okay.
that much, and it made sense. I understood it.
Okay.
There was a house in LA that E1 had that we could use, and there's a 4-bedroom house, and you would get charged $100 a night to stay in a room
Canadian?
there, Canadian. So,
Yeah.
great,
It's amazing.
like and we would go and rent the whole house.
For sure.
So we do song camps out of there, and so we're running song camps and having a place to stay in LA in West Hollywood for $400 a night.
I didn't
Like,
know this. Really?
yeah, it was
Okay.
amazing. We did stuff for Pyrex out of there. We did stuff
Oh,
for
dope.
Bretto out of there. We did Jesse Royal's Royal album, which ended up being Grammy nominated album. So we were managing Jesse Royal.
Shit.
E1 was his publisher. We did a song camp. It was Jesse, Protege, Sean Alaric, Vision, Bread. And then a few other people came in and out. So like Batista came in for a bit as well. And we made the bulk of what would become Royal, the Royal album, um, there. And then we did some tracking as well over at Truth Studios, which was like a walking distance away. And
Nice.
that album went on to become Grammy nominated reggae album. Like that was done from that house.
Also, studio was around the Grove area there?
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was like a 10-15 minute walk.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Dope.
Yeah.
So that was the structure over there with E1 and
Mhm.
Quiet as Kept. What was the structure with Public and Universal?
So again, we were advanced operating dollars. We did rent office space. And so we rented a space, and then I had some operating dollars where I could pay myself and then pay my interns and then eventually my staff. Um, and then we had a set amount in an A&R fund that was administered through Universal. So this wasn't in my account, but we'd have a set amount that we have, where we could sign stuff as well as, pay for recording costs and marketing costs, etc.
Mhm.
And artists were signed directly to Universal. So Public had a taste on the back end as a corporation,
Okay.
but they were signed. Like when you signed a contract, you
Yeah.
signed to Universal
Okay.
with Public as the forward-facing brand.
Okay.
And we were essentially glorified A&Rs that had some marketing spends that we could do. But
Okay.
it was the Universal system that was ostensibly set up to support us in administering the funds and releasing the records. In practice, it was very much us like making the decisions on what
Right.
to sign and how to spend,
Right.
and also
And how to
end up
market.
doing the marketing and
Well,
everything. Yeah.
so to that, like when you're in this deal, how are you feeling about just getting, I guess, a small piece of whatever the sales are on the records or the streams on the records? Do you feel like that was a good deal?
I do, because it was grad school for me.
Okay.
I'd never run a record label. I had
Gotcha.
interned in an A&R department 15 years before, and then ran a nonprofit for most of my life,
Mhm.
and was up against the music industry as much as I was up against the film industry and the street fashion industry and all that, but I wasn't in
Mhm.
it. So for me, it was very much a finishing school that paid my rent, gave me some spending money, allowed me a space to learn all these things. If I was to do it again, which I feel is part of the unspoken question, um, I
I
w-
was gonna I was gonna ask.
yeah,
Yeah.
I would probably do it. But if I was to do it now,
Well,
I would say I'm stuck. Like what I recognize about myself, which is I think an important realization, um, is that I'm not a good businessman and I'm not a good entrepreneur. Actually, I hate being an entrepreneur, but I'm very entrepreneurial, meaning
explain that.
I need structure to support me, just as some of the people like I talked about earlier needed that structure for them to thrive and to go off. I need structure around me.
Yeah.
I'm not the person that's going to be on top of like administration stuff, taxes,
Yeah. No, no, no.
payroll. I'm gonna make sure that you get paid.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm gonna make sure, like, I'm gonna put myself in a deficit to make sure you're good. But that's also not great business in
Fuck
the
yeah.
long term, right?
No, I
So,
get it. But you have a
um,
different skill set,
I
which is,
have
I think
I have important skill sets. I'm not
no, no,
saying
you
I'm an
have
idiot. I'm
no,
saying, like,
no, to be
I'm
clear,
not good at those
you
things.
have incredible vision, and the support to make that vision come to life is what you need.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm good at strategy, and I'm good
Oh,
at, like,
absolutely.
figuring out how things land in the world
Yeah,
and
yeah.
how you build excitement around something and support around
Yeah,
something and how you make people feel, like, valued in that process. I think I'm pretty good at managing a team
for
as
sure.
much as I am at managing a project, probably better at the team part and making sure that it's a glue
Yeah.
that sticks together. But
But
again,
you're not getting hyped over administration and
and not a lot of people are, but
yeah.
I'm, like, particularly bad at it. Like, I did grade 10 math 3 times, you know?
Okay.
Like, I'm like, it's just not my skill set. And I need structure around me to thrive, but I need the type of structure that allows me some freedom, right? Because I also don't do well when it's, like,
So
super clamped down and, like, everything by this way, and I'm like, "Nah, you don't get it. Like, let me do this way." You know? So it's that fine balance, which is really hard to find, is, like, finding a partner who believes in you, but who also is willing to, like, pick up the slack in certain areas, and I've been lucky to find that, and also part of it was luck and part of it is just being discerning over the years to,
mhm.
like, figure out, like, who is the right partner for me. Like, I say to people all the time, you don't need another you. Like, the biggest misconception in team building is, I need another me and I could do twice as much. It's like, no, you don't. You're already you.
Yeah.
You absolutely do not need another you.
Yeah,
You need
yeah.
someone who's good where you suck.
Yes.
So if you're going to build a team, start with, where am I weak? What am I not good at?
Yeah.
Okay, now I know who to go find.
Right.
Because if you have someone else who's really good at what you do, you're both going to be doing the same thing and you're still going to be not paying your taxes and fucking up over here. And,
Right.
like,
Right.
you need
Right.
someone who's really strong at the things that you suck at. And that's how you build a team. You build a team from your weaknesses, not from your strengths.
Were you informed by that experience from Deus?
Yale
Yale.
taught me that.
Okay.
Those lessons I learned from Dr. Peter Berg. And they were things that I intuitively, like, once he said them, I was like, "Oh yeah, that's right." But, like, it took him saying it. There was two things. It was like, you build from where you're weak,
Yeah.
and it was identity is elastic, which is a whole other conversation, but, like, was a really interesting thing. Those are the two biggest lessons I took from my time out there. They're both from the same guy, Dr. Peter Berg. Um, but yeah, like, the Deus space, that incubator, that when I was moving like, off of staff and into the board of Remix and helping to launch Deus, I tried to put a lot of those principles into play because I had just left Yale like 2 years before that.
Mhm.
And so they were still fresh in my mind. And this was the first opportunity to really implement them. And I was trying to build that space. But I wasn't in charge. I was the number two. And
Fair enough.
you know, I had a lot of freedom to do things the way I wanted to do them, but I didn't deal with the corporate overlords. Someone else dealt with that, and that was a very hard situation for a number of reasons.
Yeah.
That was also mostly because there were corporate overlords, but it was also a new person in that space who himself was navigating
Trying to figure it out.
trying to
Yeah, yeah.
figure that out,
All
and then
this person's trying to figure it out, and it's also out of your hands.
and
It's
it's
not
also out of my
you don't
hands.
have visibility on
And the
this.
person who I'm reporting to is figuring it out, and
Exactly.
that person's figuring it out,
Figuring it out.
and then other
'Cause
people around him are being like, "What the fuck are you doing?"
what are you trying to figure out?
Yeah, and, like, "Why are you giving all these people money and space, and what is this?" And it was just one of those things that had beautiful intentions, and honestly, like, some really great results started to emerge, but the corporate structure in Canada is very, very, very conservative.
Yes.
It is very timid.
It's across a lot of industries, I'm
Yeah,
finding.
across a
Yeah.
lot of industries, very conservative, very timid, and for the most part, has made its way through the world by being middle management to America and to other spaces. And they're essentially distribution partners to the large corporations in America, whether that's
Right.
television. and we're distributing their television shows, whether
Or
it's
music.
music, and we're taking their existing marketing plans and their existing artwork and their existing music, and we're just buying ads and promoting it in our
Mhm,
territory.
mhm.
That's why you have so many people that are lifers at record labels here, but you have people in America that are
Just
bouncing
all
all the
over the
time, all
place.
over the place or
Yeah.
whatever. And same in our large media corporations and whatnot. And so we have very conservative, very like just don't fuck up and keep your job type of mentality here for a long, 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 long time. And it's changed somewhat over the last few years, but not in drastic ways. And the folks up there that were essentially, the people trying to just like steer this giant ship, were just like, no, this is too radical of an idea, and it's too radical a way of moving through the world, and this doesn't make sense for us. And they cut ties. And again, it was a pretty brutal
Right, right,
way
right.
of doing it. And the way I describe it is they blinked, right? Like right on the, because they were just like, I don't see the results. Like, what's happening? Why are we contracting everything and owning everything? And we were like, no, you're owning cultural cachet, but you're owning relationships. And
Mhm.
if you treat these people right, they're going to want to work with you. And they're like, no, we need
They're
to
not
own their
looking at
IP. And we're like, no, you don't get to own their fucking IP,
Mhm.
And again, big love to the big homie that was leading that really fought fucking hard battles to make sure that people got to keep their rights and everything. But they just couldn't understand it. They blinked. But what was crazy is that like within the next year, it's like A Tribe Called Red, Now the Hallucination wins music video of the year for the video that we did, right? Like at Much Music Video Awards. Like
Yeah.
Pyrex signs to Def Jam. Uh, Francis Scott Heat goes and signs a publishing deal with BMG and what's his name? Big homie. Malay, like
Right.
all these things that we were
No,
incubating,
Jesse's Kiddo project.
Jesse's Kiddo project, we
It's
like
operated out of there. Yeah, you guys did a lot with
we
that.
did a lot with that. And like, at the last minute we didn't formally do something because we
We
saw the
did.
writing on the wall.
We did. There was a small in Canada,
Right.
there was a small, fee that was given to
Yes, 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 yes. Yeah,
Deus.
yeah, yeah.
It wasn't what was hoped for from Deus, but there
Right.
was still something there
Yeah.
because to your point, I was also like, we have to figure this out here because they've done a lot,
Yeah.
in terms of marketing strategy, and a lot of that was informed through Deus, but Quiet is Kept wasn't a thing yet,
It
right?
was just getting started at the very, very, very tail end of that because we knew what
Right.
was happening. Yeah.
Got you. But
But it wasn't a thing.
yeah,
Yeah, it wasn't a thing
yeah.
yet.
So yeah,
It
that
was
came
through
out of that
Deus,
space.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that Jesse project, like there was so much that came out of that like 6 months later, and
If it
it's just
just would
like
have,
you fucking blinked, man.
yeah.
And you just didn't understand what you really had here, and you were too scared because you didn't trust,
Mhm.
you know? They were like, "No, we need to own the IP. We need to own this." We're like, again, the currency is the
Such
relationship.
a different world.
And so if you just treat people right, they're going to bring the next project to you and we're going to do good business together.
Yeah.
And they're like, "No, we need to own it." And it was this big fucking battle. And they were just like, "You guys don't know what you're doing." And we're like, "You don't know what you're doing." And then we weren't the ones with the bank account. So they turned off the tap, and fucking
It
that's,
it's funny because I feel like that is like a tail end of an antiquated thought because now it's not necessarily like that.
no, it's not. It's changed a lot.
Even here.
Yeah, it's changed a lot. And shout out to Saul Guy for really fucking sinking in his heels and fighting the good fight and taking some hard L's and like, you know, really like planting seeds that he has not necessarily got to see the fruits of, but the rest of us have benefited from,
Mhm.
you know?
Mhm. Going to that conservative mindset that Canada has when it comes to corporate structure and talking about that in the music label system,
Mhm.
what are some of the pros and cons? And I ask that because when you talk about infrastructure, right? A lot of people, I just had this conversation with Minus where his question is like, why do you think that we're lacking infrastructure when it comes to the world stage? And although Remix has a huge part in building a foundation, it still does feel like it's lacking, which to your point, you said, it's why Quiet is Kept has started. Right? But when I look at that system, the corporates, the UMCs, the Sonys, the Warners, I find it very challenging to sign an artist to those labels.
Right.
because in order, and this is from my understanding, and it was confirmed by one of those presidents in a meeting that I had a conversation. But I want to make sure that I'm not talking at the side of my mouth.
Okay.
If you sign a deal with one of these record labels in Canada, if you want any chance to be able to be distributed in the US or taken serious in the US, you need a partner in the US.
Mhm.
Correct?
Correct.
So my question is, from that label system and being very conservative because of, like, why would somebody sign to one of these record labels if not everybody's guaranteed that they're going to have a partner in the US to explode? So you kind of have to prove your point here or online, or like make sure you grow that, and then you could potentially have a partner. Why would somebody sign?
They would sign here because they need the development. Canada is one of the best places to develop your craft and your business, and to use Canada as a case study to prove why someone should invest in you from the rest of the world. Now I can also answer why you wouldn't sign here.
Pros and cons.
Yes, exactly. So the pros is that you can get investment from people that are here on the ground that will understand your some of them will understand your cultural context and the nuance of breaking something out of this market, and they have the money to put up if they really believe in it,
They being the
they
record
being the
labels,
record label. Now,
the majors.
the majors, the challenge is, as you said, you don't get as much as you're now part of the Universal, the Warner, the Sony system, you don't necessarily get any special treatment outside of your home territory unless there's a partner formally on board, which means that that home label has to give up a percentage
Exactly.
to one of their partner companies in America. And no matter what, the percentage that they give up to that partner company in America is not of equal value if the American company signed you directly.
Exactly.
So they're getting the American meaning the American company is making less on the dollar because they have to do a kickback to Canada. Now, of course, they're spending less because Canada is shouldering the development costs and most of the initial recording costs and all that stuff. So it's less of a risk for them. So
Mhm.
they're willing to take it on. But when you're looking at it purely from business, if I'm taking a bigger risk on something and I'm pouring more money into something, I may be taking less of a risk here and have a strong reward, but it's not as much of a reward. But as so I'm not, it's not a risk for me.
Mhm.
So what gets more attention? The thing that I poured more money and took the gamble on.
Yep.
Even though this is not a gamble and I could just, hey, it's easy money, they're still paying marketing dollars. They're still being a good partner, still putting people hours into it, but it's less of a gamble.
Yeah.
But it's like, but I took the gamble here.
Exactly.
So I've invested my own money into this. So I have to make that back. That's my bottom
Yep.
line. And I'm going to make more on it when it pops. So you're getting more attention.
And to be clear, the
Only if something is going fucking crazy
yeah.
does that joint venture person get an equal or preferential treatment. And it has to be going fucking crazy.
And when it starts to go fucking crazy, more times than not, there's a restructuring of that deal for this partner to eat more.
Yeah.
And let's be clear, when we're talking about partners, what we're saying is, the major record labels here in Canada are Sony. I mean, across the world, it's Sony, Warner, and Universal.
Mhm.
So in Canada, we have Universal Music Canada, which is not Universal Music in the US. It's two totally different companies, like how they operate. Because
Yes. How they operate. Yes. They're
their
part of the same
operates
umbrella family.
same
They
umbrella.
report to the same people.
Using Universal as an example, right?
Yeah.
But they have Universal underneath them has majors, which are Republic, Def Jam, Capitol. So when we're talking about partners, we're talking about the partner in the US, Universal Music's partner with one of those labels,
Mhm.
same as Sony, which Sony in US is RCA, Columbia, a couple of
Yeah.
other.
Like I can give you just a worldwide, a perfect living example right now is
Yeah.
we managed Nonso Amadi,
Yeah,
who is
that's a
Afro R&B artist, originally from Nigeria, lived in the UK for a bit, moved to Canada to actually finish school.
yeah.
And while here, continued to put out music. He's
Amazing
already
artist,
putting
by
out
the way.
music in UK. Yeah, he's phenomenal.
Great
And
human
he's
being
and
as well.
exactly,
Yeah,
that's what I was about to
yeah.
say. Like he's really an awesome human being as well as a great artist. And we ended up doing a deal with Universal Music Canada, and
Through
then
public?
no.
Okay,
So he's quiet as kept management client.
okay.
We did a deal with Universal Music Canada. Def Jam becomes the partner in America. They sign on. 6 months into it, Polydor from the UK comes on,
Mhm.
and then MCA for France.
Okay,
We never end up doing a deal in the African continent,
and that's all in the universal system.
all in the Universal
Yeah.
system. MCA, Polydor, Def Jam
Yep,
are all Universal based
yep.
companies. You have to go to Universal based companies
Can't go to the
first,
yeah,
can't go to anyone else. If they
right,
pass, then you can go to
which is
someone else,
rare.
but they get a
Yeah,
chance to at least put their hand up
yeah, yeah,
first,
yeah.
right? Um, Never ended up doing a deal in South Africa or Nigeria, which are like the two big universal strongholds on the continent,
Okay.
which is, you know, for an Afro artist, I don't want to do that. We have partnerships there with people and whatever, but the business didn't happen.
Your
And
decision?
no,
Okay,
um, this is a bunch of reasons, to
okay.
be honest with you, but
All
I
good.
think everybody wanted it to happen. Why wouldn't you
Right, right.
want that partner when you already have partners in other spaces? Um, it was honestly a timing thing in a lot of ways, um, and just like a difference in expectations between the partners had nothing to do with us because our deal doesn't change. So, as an artist, when you're signed to Universal Canada, the percentage of what your deal is does not change
Mhm.
when Def Jam, Polydor, MCA come on. It's Universal's share that gets split for the territory of France with MCA, the territory of UK for Polydor,
Yeah, yeah.
the territory of America with Def Jam. Their label share gets split, but it
They
doesn't
have to
hurt me.
figure out the pie on their
They have to
side.
figure out the pie. For me as a manager, I'm like, get these other fucking countries on board. Like, I need boots on the ground who have
Yeah,
skin in the
yeah,
game, who are putting up money that I can call and be like,
yeah.
what's going on? How do we make this pop over there?
Right.
You know what I mean? I want as many partners as possible because it's not affecting my artist share or my revenue by extension, right?
Yep.
It's them. And so I need them to figure out how to play well together within their ecosystem. And then I need to figure out how to manage that process
Mhm.
because now you don't have one label to talk to, you have four, sometimes
It's
six,
a fact. Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Labels to talk to.
yeah.
I remember in the early days with Jesse Reyes being on calls, and there was like 34
13,
people
40.
on there.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I was like, this is crazy.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
what the fuck? Like,
yeah,
how many people are on this phone call right now?
yeah,
And like, of course, there's designated people that know what they're talking about and when to chime in and whatever. But it's like, this is a small army of humans around the world. Like,
yeah. And they were,
it's
but
a
they,
lot of moving
but to
pieces.
be honest, they were predominantly US and UK.
And
So it
UK.
was like Island and Polydor, but it was a lot of people on there.
Yeah.
Just to your point, very hard to manage because you are being pulled in different directions. That deal was a 50-50 profit split.
Mm,
Canada got a small piece, but we carved out Canada due to Chip Sutherland. Shout out to him,
mhm.
legal lawyer, manager who helped us structure that. But in the US, it was now a 50-50 deal between Island and Polydor. Still to this day, it's still the same agreement that she just moved through. So they both had equal amount of skin in the game. So now you had to navigate how to make sure both partners are happy. And in this day and age now, as the deal went through, we deal more with Island, but there's still a weekly conversation with Polydor for sure. I would assume so with
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Byron and Jemai. But yeah, and then you got you got to figure out how to navigate those relationships.
Yeah. Because the reality is success makes everybody happy. But and it's the same artist and it's the same product, but as we know, and people that do sales as well as managing expectations and relationships, you dress things up differently depending what room you walk into, right? There's a
That's
different way to sell something in one territory than there is in another territory. The principle, the core value, everything
all
remains
remains the
exactly the
same.
same,
Yeah.
but the way it's introduced or that its path of to success is going to look different in different spaces, right?
Yes.
Because these countries are not the same country,
Yeah, yeah. It's a good call out.
right?
Yeah.
So it's a challenge, and especially when you're doing it across massive time zones, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
which is also a challenge. You got people that are exhausted at the end of their day, jumping on
Yep.
calls with people that are like fresh in the morning. And, it's just,
That's
it's a
fun though.
challenge that you have to really take as much as it's kind of like, well, it's a business meeting. You're
No,
on the
but
same
that's a
time,
real thing.
but it's a real
It's a real
challenge
thing.
because I only get to talk to you when you're exhausted,
Yeah, yeah.
you know?
I
How do I get the best out of you?
exactly.
You know?
I've had to give up my Sundays. Now I'm working with a team in Australia.
Mhm.
And they're ahead of us 16 hours.
It's the worst time zone to navigate is Australia to Toronto.
Absolutely.
It's almost impossible.
Well, and so now they're operating on Monday fresh, ready to go, and I'm gonna communicate with them. Mind you, it's on text a lot, right? But it's my Sunday that I'm giving up to make this happen,
Absolutely.
right?
I
That's
tried
a
to I
real
tried
thing
to
that
do
people don't think
something.
about that.
No, they don't. And it really is, again, when you're trying to find a balance, because if you don't take care of yourself, if you
Yes,
don't give yourself Sunday, then you are not the person that your client deserves, right? Your
absolutely.
client deserves you at your best.
Absolutely.
And you are not at your best because you are giving up too many pieces of yourself. You're starting to pour from an empty cup,
Yeah.
right? But you still need that relationship in Australia to
Yeah.
pop off,
Mhm.
and your client needs that too.
Mhm.
And so, finding that balance does not mean saying no to a call on Sunday, but it does mean giving yourself Tuesday morning,
Mhm.
sometimes.
Mhm.
And that's okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Just because other people are working doesn't mean you need to. But finding that balance is so important, like I did that. I helped teach a fellowship last year. It was a cool moment where it's like I've been on some fellowships, and now I got to help start one at U of T, right? University of Toronto Scarborough campus. And there's the out of the dean's office there, we started something called the Dean's Circle, and it was a leadership fellowship program. And I asked Jesse to talk at one of the classes. I pulled in like Amanda Paris did one, Drex did one. It's just me pulling in my friends and people that I respect and look up to. And I asked Jesse to do one that was exactly titled that, which is why I bring it up, which is how to take care of yourself in order to be the leader that others deserve. Because I find so often that people in leadership positions, managers especially, they're masochists, or like just serving,
Yeah.
like you just serve others
Yeah.
all the time, and you give and you give and you give and you give and you get burnt out,
Yeah.
right? And we actually need our people to stay healthy. We don't want them to burn out. We need them,
Mhm.
you know? And so, but there's something that's just hardwired in their brain. I know it's in mine, that makes it very hard for me to put myself first. I feel guilty putting myself first. I feel like I'm doing a disservice to the person that's counting on me,
Yeah.
by doing that. And how I've been able to trick myself into it is by saying, well, they actually need me at my best, and I'm fucked up right now. So I need to sleep,
Yeah, yeah, that's a
or I
fact.
need to like
Yeah.
take a day
Yeah.
and chill out because they deserve better.
Mm.
And I can't give them better unless I take care of me.
Right.
And so I was able to trick myself into taking care of myself.
Yeah.
It was the same way that I worked on not drinking, when I decided I'm not going to drink alcohol anymore. And like I might have a sip here and there, but I very, very, it's been 13 years
Mm.
since I've really had a drink.
Crazy.
And I always say I'm not a quitter.
I said the same shit
So
actually.
like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah,
right.
yeah,
But I'm choosing not to,
yeah.
because I know that if I quit and then I have a drink, now I'm fucked,
Yeah.
because now I'm just gonna go down the rabbit hole,
Oh, yeah.
and be like, well, it's over now. I
Oh,
broke it. Like I can do whatever I want. It's
right.
like, but if it's a choice, then it's not like something where I'm like, oh, I'm struggling against it.
Yeah.
I'm struggling against that. I can't. I'm not allowed. I don't do well with I
Yeah, yeah,
can't. I
exactly.
don't do well with I'm not allowed,
Yeah.
but I'm great with I choose,
Right.
you know? And so I just flip that
It's a
mentality to
bar.
be like, yo, I didn't quit. I just choose not to right now.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm feel comfortable in that.
I
You know?
I think there's that part of it where leaders have a hard time thinking about themselves, first and
Mhm.
foremost, because you're serving at all times. But I think there's also this other side where leaders also believe that other individuals can't carry out their vision 100%. And
Yeah.
so they end up doing a lot of the work.
Mhm.
And some of the work that they'll do, a lot of the work actually, I feel like entrepreneurs do needs to be delegated to other people.
Absolutely.
But there's this challenge that people run into. Well, A, you don't have the finances for it. So, when you're first starting out in your journey, you got to find like minded people that
Mhm.
are set on a vision but have different skill sets,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
But I think if you're ever going to try and find somebody that's going to execute your vision 110%, you are going to run in circles
Yeah.
because it's never going to happen.
Mhm.
I always talk about this 80% rule. And so if somebody can get 80% of the way of your vision, that person is on a roll.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. It's
Yeah.
great,
Yeah.
right? So there's, I think, a lot of that.
There is. It's ego.
It's the
A lot of
ego.
it,
Yeah, yeah.
like, it's the ego, like, someone's not gonna do it the way I did it. It's
Yeah.
like,
So
so?
what?
Like, what someone
What makes you think that that's not that way is gonna be better?
it exactly, because it was your way?
Exactly.
You fucking egotistical piece of shit. Get over
Those are
yourself.
the worst arguments to
Get
have.
over
And a
yourself.
lot of people will have those arguments when it's
Yeah.
on the way to success, right?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's because we crave comfort, right? We crave familiarity,
Mm.
and that's not familiar the way you're doing it. I don't like that.
Yeah.
I'm not
Nah, nah,
sure.
nah. Yeah.
Yeah, it feels but what someone said to me a long time ago that always fucking stuck with me is like, yo, sometimes it's 2 plus 2 and sometimes it's 1 plus 3, man.
I like that.
Just like you
Yeah.
got
Whatever you
there.
got there. Either way,
Like
you got there.
process is important. I'm not saying that process is not important. Process is
No, no,
important.
no.
In some areas, way more important than in
Oh, yeah,
others.
we're not saying
You know,
that.
like yeah, I'm not throwing it out like as a blanket statement, but it is important to recognize when it's okay for it to be 1 plus 3,
Yeah.
you
Yeah, yeah,
know?
yeah. No, I mean, on that point, like, process and frameworks are really important to
Mhm.
getting to that place.
Yeah.
Because you could have your process, but I mean, something might not be connecting for a specific individual.
Right.
Just like you said, at Remix, you were tailoring the program to each individual. When you have an organization, as a leader, you have to understand each individual's strengths. And if something isn't working that's worked for you for many years,
Mhm.
doesn't mean that it's not the right way,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think my own failures like have informed that mentality. Where it's like just because something isn't working for someone doesn't mean they're stupid
Right.
or that they're not going to figure it out because I'm not an idiot and I didn't find success in X, Y, and Z. I had to find the right way for it to work for me.
Yeah.
So I'm really big on like meeting people where they're at and then figuring out like what is the solution to get to where we're trying to go.
Hmm.
Because once they figure out their process, then I can fade to black and we're all off to the races.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, like, how do we figure out what works for you? And once you develop your process, the light switch has been switched and it's good.
On that note, when it comes to process, when it comes to strategy, what do you think is the best for kids today here in this city, Toronto, to build out successful music companies?
Don't start.
Get the fuck out, man. You should have. Yo,
What's
don't
that? The
start.
fastest way to be a millionaire? Start off as a billionaire and
Start
invest
a-
in the music industry. Like, fuck.
Oh man.
No. I think
That's like this. That's the end of the manager's playbook right there. Like, just close the book. No more playbooks needed.
I think look, what kind of music company? Managers?
No, let's say record labels.
Record labels?
Let's do both.
Okay. I think
Let's start with record labels. Yeah.
if you're going to start an independent music company, the most important first piece of the puzzle is distribution, right? And is distribution in different territories. There are only 3 people to know in Canada. It's not hard, right? What's hard is breaking out of the silos that exist here because as much as the companies are global companies, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, Tidal, Pandora, etc. Really, we have 3 up here, right? We don't have Tidal or Pandora. We have Apple, Spotify, and Amazon.
Mhm.
You can meet those people,
Yeah,
find a way in. It is not that
it's not that
difficult if
difficult.
you're super like passionate and you go hard. You show up at events, you go to
Yeah,
talks. Eventually you'll get plugged in,
yeah,
right?
same people there. Yep.
It's not hard. But the reality is these global companies operate in silos, and these global companies have sales goals. They are for-profit companies. They are not there to make you famous. They are there to make money, right? So how they exist is they exist on a subscription model, right? So their business model is to get more people to sign up to be subscribers or to keep subscribers from falling off.
Exactly.
Every territory has their own sales goals and their own thresholds that they're trying to hit, right? And maintain. So it is more important for a, the Spotify in America to have an artist, independent artist from Detroit, who's going to tell all of his or her friends to go listen to their song on Spotify than it is to program a song from Toronto. Because Toronto, if the artist is telling all their friends, then Canada's going to get the subscription sales. If the Detroit kids telling their friends, then the Detroit subscription sales are going to go up
Mm.
and their fans, which ultimately drives their bottom line.
Mhm.
So they are siloed by sales goals and sales projections, even though the music is universal. And there's kids in Detroit that will like the song in Toronto, and there's kids in Toronto that will like the song in Detroit. Doesn't mean that they won't program it. It means that the preference, if there's only 3 slots left on here because Universal, Warner, and Sony have all their priorities and they're pouring millions of dollars into these companies for advertising, so they're gonna get certain slots on the playlist, and there's 3 left for independent artists, and this is a US-based playlist, they're going to program 9 times out of 10 a US-based independent artist because it's going to help their sales goals,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
It's simple
Yeah,
business,
yeah.
but that's not how we think about it because we think about it as the art. And it doesn't matter.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
There's great songs coming out of Detroit, just like there's great songs coming out of Toronto.
Yeah.
So they need someone in Detroit to tell all their friends to go sign up for fucking Spotify and get a new subscription to boost their quarterly profits.
Okay. How do we
So to break into those places,
Yeah.
you if you have something that's going viral on social media, they can't ignore it because the kid in Detroit is seeing it and wants to hear it. So they're going to go to the playlist looking for it. And if they don't find it, they're going to look somewhere else. Right. So again, if you are going super crazy, it's going to happen. Now, that is a unicorn moment. It's a very rare phenomenon that you're going to have a viral moment that's going to then allow your song to go everywhere on the cross playlists. What you have to do is figure out how you or your song is relevant to that territory. So, whether that's having a distribution company that's based in that territory, whether you are touring and doing shows in that market and you can show that you're in that market and you're going to go do the show and people are buying tickets and going to you and you're telling people to go listen to my song on here, or whether you have a feature from an artist from that market,
Mhm.
or a producer from that market,
Mhm.
something that ties you to that space
Mhm.
will give you a much better chance of landing editorial placement on those DSPs. And ultimately, as an independent record label, your goal is to generate income. So you are building your distribution, and that's just the DSP distribution. Now, the way that everything's going right now, the most important thing you can be doing is building your email list
Direct to fan.
as a direct to fans,
Yeah.
right? So distribution is a larger conversation than distributing to DSPs, but that is what most people think about and talk about when they talk about distribution. They're talking about digital distribution to Apple, Amazon, etc. Again, how do you now develop a pipeline direct to consumer to sell your product, whether that's songs, merchandise, ticket sales, etc. The most powerful thing that you can have is someone's email address at this point
Why is that?
because because it's directly going to them and it feels personalized. And on social media, they're getting a million ads that are popping up. They're swiping through. They're used to swiping past stuff. And email feels personalized. And if you've got someone's email address, it's because they've opted in to giving it to you, which means that there's an emotional relationship that has
Yep.
started.
Yep.
And that emotional relationship needs to be nurtured and it needs to grow. It can't be taken for granted.
Mhm.
It's like any relationship in life.
Mhm.
The moment you take the other person for granted is the moment it starts to wither and die. Right. So they've bought into you. They've given you an email address. That means there's a bit of an emotional connection. There's some sort of excitement or spark of something new here.
Mhm.
And now you have to like figure out a way to keep serving that person in a way that they're going to want to then invest back into you,
Mhm.
meaning buy your products, right? So if you're starting a music company as an independent record label in Canada, you're figuring out a distribution partner for the digital side that is going to help you break into other markets. You're not so worried about Canada because Canada is important to you, but you should be able to do that on
On
your
your own.
own. You're building your direct to consumer email list, and figuring out how to actually make it worthwhile of being on that email list for someone. What are they getting?
Mhm.
Right. Um, and then you're figuring out like physical sales and kind of like activations, you know? I think that as a record label up here, you are best served if you can also sell like some physical units, so vinyl, t-shirts, etc., and have some sort of branded activation. Doesn't have to be weekly, but like quarterly or something that builds an emotional connection, a physical meeting place, as well as becomes an ancillary revenue stream because it's an uphill slog to uh, through the digital side. And you're getting paid pennies on the dollar, and you need to figure out like ancillary, meaning different ways of generating revenue. And so by creating something that allows you to become part of the cultural conversation and have cultural relevance, um, allows to diversify that income stream, but also becomes a physical touch point for fans to become supporters.
Mhm.
And those things are important because going back to my earlier point of we're tribal people, or we're folks that are looking to belong to something.
Mhm.
You have to give them signifiers to show what they
Yeah,
belong
that let
to.
them know they're a part of something.
Yeah, and that's coming to an event, that's wearing a t-shirt,
Yeah.
that's wearing a hat,
Yeah.
that's like team uniforms,
Yeah, exactly.
right?
Yeah.
That they want to be proud to show off.
Yeah.
And they're proud to show off because of this cool thing that they experienced and this emotion that they left with. Because at the end of the day, we are catering to selling and navigating human emotion,
Mhm.
right? We're trying to make sense of the world through art.
Mhm.
And that's why people are listening to your music,
Mhm.
is they're either trying to find joy in a moment, soundtrack to joy, soundtrack to heartache, soundtrack to, confusion, soundtrack to anger,
Mhm.
but they're trying to navigate their own personal experience. And you are the soundtrack to that. And so we're creating emotional connections, and we want to create physical spaces that people can tap into those things or can show that and represent that they're a part of it, or that this is how they feel,
Yeah.
you know? Because like going back to clothing, even clothing is armor, right? Like we dress in clothing to project an idea of who we are to people,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and to protect ourselves in some ways, as much as we're signaling to others
Yeah.
that that this is who I am and maybe we can get
Yeah, yeah,
along. You
exactly.
know what I
Yeah,
mean?
exactly.
Like,
Till this day.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so the merch is an extension of the emotion, which is an extension of the brand, which is an extension of the belonging, and this is all that we're selling. And again, if you're trying to make money off of, you know, a million streams being $5,000 that the artist is getting the majority of, like you got to find multiple touch points for people to buy into. And as the artist should always be first thing that you're pushing and that you're selling, but people should want to buy the Rockaware shirt as much as they want to listen to Beanie Siegel's album. You know what I mean? Like, because they're getting a piece of that, but they're getting all of this, you
Right,
know?
right, right, right. When you talk about, I mean, that's all to me building your community.
Hmm.
Talk to me about not only building the community within the fans of the artist, but building the community with other individuals who are also trying to get their artists recognized from the same city or from the same country. How important is that?
It's incredibly important. Like I was saying earlier, whether you're looking for a sandwich or you're looking for a record deal or you're looking for a distribution partner or you're looking for a PR company that actually works, you go to who you know first,
Yeah.
and we want to go to people who've been there and done that, who've tried, tested, and true,
Mhm.
you know? And so you're not going to get that by operating solely in your own bubble. Like we need to be bouncing things off each other all the time, being like, "Hey, I tried this, it didn't work. Oh yeah, did you try this? Because it worked for me. Okay, bet. Let's go see that." The more that someone succeeds from your city, the further the door opens for you to walk through,
Yeah.
right? Because everyone wants to say they're the first. No one wants to actually be first. And once someone is through that door, the rest of the world starts to pay attention to go, well, what else is in
Yeah,
there?
real talk.
What else is happening?
Yeah.
You know? Um, so it's actually beneficial for us to push each other up and pull each other up the
Absolutely.
ladder. One, because we're gonna learn stuff, but two, because it's gonna cause more of a spotlight to come back to our city in general.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I you touch on something there, and because we're from the same generation. So I'll never ever discredit what OVO has done, what EXO has done, because we come from a generation where we knew how difficult it was to break not only to the world, especially with this genre of music,
Mhm.
but in America.
Mhm.
And so, and I think remix informs this in my life, but I could never. No, I think I've naturally had this, but remix has definitely crystallized it. Where if you're looking at OVO, especially from the city, and you're looking at it with some kind of like, ah, man, like I'm not really rocking with that. Like they're not really representing us. You lose a lot of potential education and learning. Okay, well, how did this work?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
And there's this thing that people say a lot. They're like, "Oh, you're pocket watching. You're pocket watching." I don't call it pocket watching. I call it financial literacy. I'm not looking at your what you're building your businesses with envy. I'm looking at it to say, "Wow, that's incredible." How? With a
yeah,
genuine
exactly.
curiosity.
With a genuine curiosity is the way. And I think now they are so successful and definitely still tapped into the community in
Oh,
certain ways, but
100%.
but also far enough removed that most of the petty shit is is fallen away and is whatever.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
you
yeah.
should, as a young person, look at that the way that I grew up looking at Def Jam and being like, how can I learn?
Right.
And how can I grow? And you have even better that it's from your
From your
backyard
backyard.
and you can learn from that and grow
Absolutely.
because they are phenomenal success stories that are both of those companies are unicorn companies. And so for two of them to have grown from relatively the same place um is
It's an anomaly, man.
incredible. It's a huge anomaly and is an incredible thing that there we have to you have to be a student of the game. As Big C what often repeats to me, your ego is not your amigo,
I
right?
could hear him
And
saying that.
yeah,
Yeah.
your ego is not your amigo, my friend. And
Shout out Big C.
shout out Big C for being one of the realest ones.
Yeah.
Craig Mannix. But you know, you have to put it aside. I think to be successful in any industry, you have to be a student of that industry. You have to have a genuine passion for that
Yeah.
industry. And if jealousy is clouding your vision, maybe you should look at doing something else because you actually don't love it.
That's a bar.
You know, you
Yeah.
love success.
Yeah.
You love a lifestyle.
Yeah.
That's what you want.
Right.
You don't love this
You
shit.
don't love this shit.
Because if you love this shit, you'd be like, how?
Yeah.
Let me figure that out.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
That's
sick.
amazing.
Yo, you
That's
did that.
yeah,
That's
that's
crazy.
crazy. I've been wanting to figure this out as well. Now you figure it out.
Exactly.
Yo,
You fucking
this is
love it then.
amazing.
But if you are clouded by
Right.
jealousy, you don't love this shit.
Yeah.
You just love their perceived lifestyle.
And that is very
That's
perceived
what you
because you
want.
don't know what these people had to go through.
Absolutely not. So that would be my thing, man. Think about go find what you actually love.
That's what's up, man. Yeah.
You know?
This is a tough one to get through for sure, man.
It is, man, but your ego is not your amigo, man. And if you love this shit, then study it. Be a student of it.
Yeah.
You know, like really dive in, do YouTube, like go show up, ask people. I read a lot, but I actually learn best through conversation. So I just go and ask people shit. And to that point, as much as we live in a digital world, you have to be
Gotta be
outside.
outside.
You have to be outside. Most of the successes I've had have come because I'm outside, because I go hang out, talk to people. And then to your point, you're like, how do you see things that come together and like whatever? It's because I know what you're into. I know what you care about. I know what you're trying to do. And then my brain goes, oh, I just had a conversation with someone about this. Do you know this person? You guys should connect.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
and then sometimes I stay involved and sometimes I get out of the way, but I wouldn't know to make that connection if I wasn't outside.
Right.
You have to go
You
outside.
do. Yeah, because social media, the internet is just a medium. It
Yeah.
looks like it's all created there, but no, these people are using Kai Cenat as an example.
Mhm.
I'm sure he's built a community around him to make the thing work. It's just that the medium is online. But I'm
Absolutely.
sure he was outside to figure this out. How can you not be?
You have to have people skills, and also there's other people that talk about this. Ty Baisden, someone that talks about this,
Yeah.
which is that some relationships are transactional and that's
So
okay.
more than
It's
okay.
totally
Yeah,
fine.
yeah. He talks about that
Right?
in his book, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
he
yeah.
does. And
Yeah.
he's talked about it on podcasts.
Yeah.
He's a brilliant. You should read his book if you're
If you
trying to be in the
haven't.
music industry. You
Yeah.
absolutely should read his book. Like he's a brilliant guy who's built it from the ground up. Um, and gives information in a very relatable, honest, and just brilliant way. Um, but those transactional relationships are fine, and a lot of those are internet relationships, and a lot of people mistake internet relationships with real life.
Yes.
I have the relationships I have because I've gone out. We've like hung out late into the night at places like at live concerts, at music, eating food, talking about our dreams, our hope, our aspirations. I go to funerals, I'm at birthday parties, I'm at christenings. Like that's why I have the strength of the relationships I have. And I don't do that because of the strength of the relationship. I do that because that's my community, someone I care about. But it also goes to the strength of the relationship, right?
Yeah.
Like there's a reason why I have a link to almost anything is because I've been there with someone through something and they've been there with me. That's why they can call me. You know what I mean? Like
Genuine.
it's genuine, but that it comes through shared experiences.
Yes.
That's what lends itself to you. Now, some of these are extreme. Like I have trauma bonds with a lot of people, but I'm going to the ends of the earth for the people I'm trauma bonded with. And I'm not saying go out there and do something stupid with someone or go
No,
through
no, but
some
you're a
crazy
very
shit.
loyal
But like,
person, man.
yeah, but like, that, again, you just can't replace human connection and human experience. And you can have very meaningful relationships with people that you meet online. But there comes a point where at any given time, that person can just not answer your DM or just like they don't have an emotional connection to
Correct.
you in the same way that if we had dinner at 2 a.m. after the club
Yeah.
and like we're talking
Just
about our
kicked in on some
dreams and
real life
hopes
shit.
and like what we're trying to do and sharing things about our family
Yeah.
and things that we've gone through. So there's no replacing going outside. There just isn't, you know. You don't have to be the most outgoing person. You don't have to be the most like, the biggest personality and lighting up the room. You have to be there.
Mhm.
Like people look at us, some of these younger kids would be like, man, they joke Illuminati, like, how do you guys all know each other? Da da da. I'm like,
Right,
because
right, right.
there used to be 500 of us or 250 of
Yeah.
us, like Basquiat used to have the downtown 500.
Okay.
He'd be like, New York is the same, as much as there's millions of people in New York, it's the same 500 kids at every art show, at every concert, at every party. It's the same 500 kids. And so I used to joke and be like, in Toronto, we have the downtown 250. And like,
Yeah,
'cause we're a
yeah, yeah,
smaller
yeah,
city,
yeah.
but it's the
That's
same
good.
people. And 20 years later, there's about 30 of us left.
Yeah.
And doesn't mean everyone's dead, but like some people have passed on, some people got deported, some people got jobs, got
Doing other
families,
things, yeah.
they're doing other things, whatever. There's 30 of us still here, and we have those memories, and we have that in common, and we have that history. And we might not have been the closest friends, but you remember what Riley's was on Wednesday night. And when I call you, you're gonna pick up the phone because we saw each other at Riley's on Wednesday, and you're from that school.
Yeah,
You know what I
of
mean?
course.
So that means something. It's not replaceable. Be part of your city's downtown 500 or your downtown 250, because in a few years from now, when you're one of the last ones standing, those relationships that are in place, those familiar faces, that sense of you understand me
Mhm.
because you were there. We might not have been close, but I know you were there and I was there, and that means something.
Yeah, can't
Like,
replace that.
nah, man, it's like Ocean's 11 when they're like, uh there's a code for those that shook Sinatra's hand.
Right. Oh, yeah,
There's
yeah,
a
yeah,
code
yeah.
among people that shook Sinatra's hand. I'm like, I feel that way about Nip. I feel that way about Nipsey Hussle. Like, if you shook Nipsey's hand and you had a certain thing, like, there's a code now amongst us.
Yeah.
We got to carry
I feel
certain
that
things on,
yeah,
and we got to and check for each other. I was never close with Nip, but we had a brilliant conversation. We like built a true like value of respect, in a short period of time before he passed away. And now if like I know if I met someone through him, I'm always answering their phone call.
Mm,
There's people that hit me that I met through him where
mhm,
it's like, okay, cool. What do you need? What do
mhm,
you got? I got you.
mhm,
Because we both shook Nip's hand.
mhm.
You know what I mean? Like we were both at Riley's on Wednesday night. Like I said, Jay Devonish and all them. Shout out them for creating a space before, remix, before
Yeah,
the internet in a lot of ways. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
the internet existed, but in that kind of way. Um, those things all mean something and you can't replace them. You have to go outside. You have to build relationships.
kids need to have their next, the new downtown 250.
The new downtown 250 and it exists.
I'm sure it does. Yeah.
But if you want to be a part of the cultural scene or the cultural industry, then you have to be part of the cultural scene.
Yes. That's yeah. Can't bypass that.
You can't.
Yeah.
You have to be a part of it.
Yeah.
You have to contribute. If you're not contributing, you're a leech.
A fact.
You know what I mean? Like,
Absolutely,
and
bro.
you're going to be seen as such and exposed as such down the line.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
You know?
Like very fast you can get weeded out from that stuff.
Yeah. So like, go contribute, man. Toronto has an incredible cultural community that still happens. I pop out every once in a while, not nearly as much
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
anymore,
I
but I
mean,
still tap
family
in here
man,
and there
bro.
to see
Yeah.
what's.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also it's not my generation,
Exactly.
and I recognize
Yeah, yeah.
that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like I will support individuals, but I'm at a place now where recognizing things still and being like, oh, this is really cool. I see it popping off. I'm going to support that because if I support that, by extension, that's going to support the downtown 250.
Yeah.
I don't need to go and support the 250. If I can support this, that's going to be that
Mhm.
because that's not me anymore.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I have this, but I also am not going to close off to that because I'm going to wither and die. You
You're one of the greats, brother.
know?
One of the
Likewise.
ghosts, man. I appreciate you so
Likewise.
much for doing this, man.
No, likewise, man. I appreciate you getting me out of the house, out of the burbs.
What's next for you, sir?
Um, just continuing to support storytellers. I truly believe that culture shifts culture. And I think every generation has the ego to believe that they're at an important moment in time. But I do believe that we're at an important moment in time in terms of world history and global history. And I think that, it's going to take a lot of people from a lot of different corners of society pushing to make, the world a better place, not to sound corny, but like for it to be the place that we want our children to grow up in.
Mhm.
And for me, my mission is to shift culture by shifting culture. And that means empowering storytellers, culture creators, that are telling stories about, you know, what the world could be, that another world is possible, that what love means, what community means, what acceptance means, what forgiveness means, um, you know, by what stepping into your truth without stepping on someone else's
Yeah.
means, you know? Um, so that's what's next for me. Like I'm really interested in film. Even like I've always been interested in film. I've helped, I've executive produced like 9 short films through the City Life project, maybe 12. But then since then, like I co-wrote Division short film with Paul Eckstein, rest in peace. I did that short film with Charles Officer and Gord Downey, rest in peace. Um, but I'm getting more into like film projects, even more so, like really stepping into it and helping connect the dots around stuff. Because it's the most collaborative art form out of all of them. Music
Yeah,
plays a big
absolutely.
part of it,
Yeah.
obviously, but so does directing, so does lighting, so does acting, so does writing, like, all this stuff. Um, Comedy to me is really exciting. I feel like the comedy industry in Toronto is feels like what the music industry felt like in 2008,
Mm,
where it feels like there's this really exciting energy bubbling
really?
right now.
Okay.
And there's certain people that feel like they're starting to pop off internationally and might really break through,
Yeah.
but it hasn't quite happened yet.
Uh,
And there's this sense of like scrappy community that's trying to figure it out. And there's no infrastructure and there's no teams. And it's just like smart, fucking hungry people just doing it. And comedians are so important to our society because they're our
absolutely.
truth tellers,
Yeah, absolutely.
right? They allow for conversation. They create space for conversations, for really hard conversations through humor.
Yeah.
And we need them,
Yeah.
the good ones, the great ones. So I'm really excited about the comedy industry and like trying to figure out where I can play a supporting role in that space using some of the lessons I've learned
Mhm.
in other spaces. So I think like, it's going to be continuing in music, of course, like supporting, because that's just a part of my DNA is like supporting great uh, musicians and producers and artists and helping mentor people trying to do the business side of it. But it is like this next phase for me is really kind of, I think, expanding the vision, being intentional around it, not spreading myself too thin, but expanding the vision to really like step into this film space and try to like support the folks that are already in the community space to level up to the next rung on the ladder that they deserve to be on.
To tell the stories.
Yeah, to tell the story, help storytellers.
I asked this of some of my guests. I gotta ask you, what are 3 books that you would recommend? You are an avid reader. Off the top,
But
don't think about it, man. Don't think about it.
but the books are not music industry
Doesn't
books.
matter.
Okay,
No,
fine.
it doesn't matter.
Absolutely. Then In the Hands of Men by Jen Sexsmith.
Okay.
It's fucking brilliant. Um, yeah, it's an important read, I think, for many different reasons. And an important read for young men as much as it is from a young woman's perspective. Um, but it's fire.
Okay.
Yeah. It's and this you could read the back and you'd understand it, but it's like it's completely its own thing in its own world, and I'm gonna cheapen it by whatever, but I'll say like if it was a movie or a TV series, it'd be like Dexter meets The Walking Dead,
Okay.
but like from an indigenous women's gaze against the backdrop of MMIW.
Okay. Okay. That's the description. Yeah. All
It's
right.
fire.
All right.
And but her writing style is just so fucking good. It's like
Okay.
these like streams of consciousness that get punctuated by a sentence that just hits you in the fucking gut. It's really good. Another one that I just finished that I really liked was called In this
Look it up.
the moon of
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, look it up.
the moon of crusted snow. and then the Moon of the Autumn Leaves, I think is what it's called. It's Wob.
The Moon of the Crusted Snow?
Yeah,
Yeah,
you got it there?
yeah.
So there's 2 parts, right? I just read both of them back to back, and you can read them individually or you can read them back to
That
back.
one?
Yeah, Moon of the Crusted Snow and then Moon of the Turning Leaves
Okay,
is the second part,
okay.
and they were really great reads. I really enjoyed them as well. They're kind of like
It's
if you
fiction or
like
nonfiction?
fiction, dystopian,
Okay.
but like grounded in community and just really kind of looking at a not too distant future at all. And I think I remember reading something where he was saying that he was inspired by the blackout back in the day.
Mhm.
Remember like the big blackout that happened across the eastern
Like all 3?
seaboard? And
Yeah.
yeah, he was inspired by that and like told this a fictional story about an extended blackout and whatever. And it's set in the north, in a small reservation in the north, and then um, yeah, them trying to figure out what's going on in the world as society breaks down, etc. It's like it's really good though, and it's really smart. And 3 books. So, In the Hands of Men by Jin Sexsmith, uh, The Moon of the Crusted Snow and Moon of the Autumn Leaves, by Wab. And what did I just? I mean, you know what? I'll just go to Our Word is Our Weapon, which is a collection of writings from the Zapatistas and Subcomandante Marcos, which was such a pivotal book in my life. And it's a collection of like communiques from the jungle and from like his writings and his ideas, as well as the philosophies of the elders and the community leaders and the people that informed him. Um, and really talks about how you can use storytelling and use the media to develop a global support system, and is an example of what imagination and creativity and the power of the word can do to literally stop a war.
Mm, man, I appreciate your time, bro. I appreciate your friendship, man,
Likewise.
and thank you for doing this. I always learn something new when I talk to you.
Well, it's a two-way street, as I keep saying. So I
Appreciate you,
appreciate you.
brother.
Same way, man. Sure.
Thank you so much.